Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated as we are about to start. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the second event of Women's Policy Action Network on Empowering Women, a Future-Ready Workforce. To commence proceedings, I would like to invite Dhananath Fernando, CEO of the Advocata Institute, to give the welcome speech.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Advocata Institute, I warmly welcome, first of all of you for empowering women, a future-ready workforce. I was quite hesitant when Thatsarani wanted me to do the introductory remarks, because what we often see is a lot of women forums where men comes and dominate. So I said, I really do not want to do it. I try to become the token man here just to do the introduction on behalf of Advocata Institute. And we have a female-driven organization. So I think 85% of our team members are females, so I'm very proud of that fact, and Advocata as an institute was also built on their strengths. So thank you very much again for being here, and thank you very much for the time. I warmly welcome Ambassador Ivank from the Embassy of Netherlands. Thank you very much. And all the panelists, I will not go name by name because I think the time is quite important. Thank you very much, and I also want to quickly thank our team members who are basically driving this project. Dr. Roshan Pereira, she has been amazing. This is the second event that we are doing because we felt this is quite important to overcome the economic crisis, to get more female labor force participation into our economy. Thank you very much, Dr. Roshan. And also Thatsarani. Ms. Hiranaka was asking, where's Thatsarani? I said she must be somewhere around because she was busy organizing everything. Thank you very much. And also Numi and Chantal and Akhila, who have been driving this project. So with that, I will stop. Thank you very much. I warmly welcome on behalf of Advocata for this event, Empowering Women and a Future-Ready Workforce. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dhananath. On behalf of the Netherlands Embassy, we welcome Mr. Ivan Rochens to the podium for his remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants and panel members. First of all, let me tell you that I'm absolutely delighted to be here today with you at this important event. The Netherlands is using every opportunity to underline that investing in women is not only the right thing to do, but also a smart thing to do. Not so long ago, men and women's roles in the Netherlands were strictly divided along traditional gender lines, with men at the head of the family, and up until 1956, there was hardly a married woman working in the Dutch civil service. In fact, women automatically lost their jobs as soon as they took their marriage vows. During the 60s, the Dutch government, under pressure of great societal changes, took an increasingly liberal position, essentially holding that men and women must be permitted to arrange their lives as they wish, not hampered by gender. From then onwards, the Dutch government has actively sought to promote equal rights, opportunities, and responsibilities for men and women. One of the chief aims is to strengthen the economic independence of women and raise the percentage of women in employment. This means getting more women into work and making it possible for men and women to share work and care responsibilities more equally. Increasing gender equality has offered and will continue to offer huge opportunities and benefits for the Dutch economy, for individuals, for companies, and within sectors, and for the country as a whole. It helps to solve the current growing labor shortages in sectors as healthcare, education, and technology. As the Dutch population is aging, we see the size of the available workforce shrink, while technological advances such as digitization and automation increase demand for specific technical skills, especially in digital skills. Better employment of qualified females will help to deal with these changes in the labor market. McKinsey & Company estimated that if women participated in the Dutch labor force at the rate of their best performing peers, this would add more than 100 billion euros of the GDP to the Netherlands. And having said that, gender equality is the key to accelerate economic growth in any given scenario, even during an economic crisis, or maybe I should say, especially in an economic crisis. We believe that goes for the Netherlands, for Sri Lanka, and for all other countries in the world. The Netherlands is very active in international fora to increase the global gender impact thanks to synergies with other stakeholders. Therefore, the Netherlands is an active partner and strong supporter of any major donor and many global projects and programs on gender equality. I name a few international organizations that have an active gender agenda. That's the International Labour Organization with the Better Work Program, and they set standards on gender-based violence at work. I mentioned the OECD, with a focus on economic gender equality and business and human rights. I mentioned the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation, United Nations with UN Women and the UN High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, and also the World Trade Organization, UNCTAD, who have very good projects going on globally on e-trade for women. Remarkably, despite women constituting half of the world's population, achieving equal representation and decision-making remains an elusive goal. Whether in politics, boardrooms, or in important reforms such as digital transformation, women's voices often struggle to gain the prominence they deserve. This disparity has prompted the Netherlands to adopt a new policy lens, the Netherlands Feminist Foreign Policy, to address this persistent inequality. But what exactly does a feminist foreign policy entail? It encompasses the protection of human rights and the promotion of meaningful participation in decision-making of women and LGBTQ+ individuals. Our feminist foreign policy is guided by 4 R's: rights, representation, resources, and reality check. This approach aims to ensure universal rights for women worldwide, eradicate violence, amplify their representation in political spheres, and allocate necessary resources and adapt policy goals to local contexts, such as here in Sri Lanka. So why is this mission crucial for the Netherlands and also for Sri Lanka? The answer is actually very simple. Whether equality prevails, our world becomes safer, more stable, and profoundly prosperous. Championing women's rights means advocating for a better and more prosperous nation. As Sri Lanka pushes through a reform agenda, there couldn't be a more opportune moment. As we strive for progress, we must confront the challenges that persist. Stereotypes and cultural norms are hard to overcome as they are strongly influenced by traditional perceptions and gender roles. Recognizing the equal position of women is essential for any society to reach its fullest potential. To truly level the playing field, we must embrace not only formal but also substantive equality. This demands acknowledging the unique challenges and needs women face and understanding the distant impact policies they have on them. Sri Lanka is sitting on a huge economic female potential, and that is awaiting to be unlocked. And we, the Netherlands, our experts, our companies, stand ready to assist you. And in closing, I extend my gratitude to everyone involved today to today's event, and wish Advocata success as they continue their vital work. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruchins. I would now like to invite Thatsarani Sirivardhana and Akhila Randenia of the Advocata research team for a presentation on their research on social infrastructure for gender equality and empowerment.
Hello, good evening to everyone. To start us off, we'd like to talk about social infrastructure in Sri Lanka and how, or what we have found out to be a little bit lacking. One second, please. Right, so let's start off with a little bit of numbers. As we all know, Sri Lanka currently has female labor force participation that has been stagnating around 30% for the last couple of years. Now, if you had to look at the 60% of those, or the 70% of those who aren't in labor, 70% of those who aren't in the labor force cite housework or care work as a reason for not participating in the labor force. For every hour that a woman spends on domestic chores, she forgoes the opportunity to engage in the labor market in order to invest in educational activities. This unequal distribution of care responsibilities is directly linked to discriminatory social institutions and gender norms. And we at Advocata believe that redistribution of this care could help increase women's participation in the labor force. Not only do these disparities affect children and their quality of life, but according to a 2017 World Bank report, having a child under the age of 5 in a household reduces the chances of a woman joining the labor force by 7.4%, compared to if she did not have a child, resulting in a low female labor force, as I mentioned earlier, of about 30 to 35%, despite high literacy and education in Sri Lanka. So focus areas that we've focused on currently are childcare, elderly care, and parental leave. So the issues that we found with childcare is that there's a lack of affordability and access to frequent and quality childcare. With regards to the elderly care, Sri Lanka has an aging population where we expect those aged 65 or above to double by the year 2040. And with parental leave, we have no mandated paternal leave, and the employer currently bears the costs of maternity leave. So let's move directly into childcare. So primarily, we have two issues that we have found out with childcare. The first is the issue of accessibility, and the second is an issue of regulation and monitoring. According to Varnasuriya 2020, most private daycare centers operate from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., making them unable to accommodate different work schedules, especially for those who work in the informal sector. And if you have to look at a study done by Verity Research, the cost of existing paid childcare is estimated to be in the range between 22,400 and 27,000 rupees per month, where in comparison to the median income of a woman in the same sample size was 25,500 rupees. Now, when it comes to regulation and monitoring, the Early Childhood Development Census of 2016 found that 68% of children from wealthier households in urban areas were likely to attend preschool. And in comparison to those in rural areas, only 48% of children were able to do so. And further, a cross-sectional study carried out by the CMC of 96 randomly selected daycare centers concluded that the overall quality of care was considered to be termed mediocre, with 25% of preschools considered to be of poor quality, only 6% of them to be of good quality. So let's give this a little bit of context and a little bit of numbers. So currently in Sri Lanka, as the numbers for 2021, there are about 1.9 million children aged from age 0 to 5. And however, the total number of students registered under all daycare centers is around 474,000, which is about 25%. We also have most of our private care centers to be run privately, which comes out about 80%, and that number is about 15,353. So what do we recommend? We recommend two things. The first is that we would like to see more regulation and monitoring of childcare centers. We would like to utilize local government mandates via bylaws to enact local legislation to set up standardized and regularized daycare centers. Secondly, we'd also like to incentivize the corporate sector to open private daycares, and we'd like to encourage this by utilizing existing infrastructure such as schools and daycare centers and just driving more investment into them. I'd like to bring up my colleague Thatsarani to speak on elderly care now.
Thank you, Akhila. So let's focus on elderly care. So Sri Lanka is expected to face an aging population by the year 2060. So this is a prediction done by the Asian Development Bank. As predicted by the Asian Development Bank, the dependency ratio will nearly double. So what does this mean? This means that each working adult will have twice as many elderly to support. So the first diagram shows that in 2020, Sri Lanka's population structure have majority of children and labor force. And the second diagram showcases that their prediction for 2060, how the population structure will switch to the majority being the elderly population. And this is a problem that the country is not ready to face. Currently, women bear a disproportionate burden of care work. 2 points that need to be highlighted is that, compared to men, women spend 3 hours and 12 minutes more engaging in domestic services. And also, compared to men, women spend 54 minutes in providing unpaid care services, such as taking care of the elderly and the children. When providing domestic services and unpaid caregiving services, there is a significantly disproportionate burden carried out by women. This also means that when providing elderly care, the burden will be carried out by women. So, what are the existing infrastructure? So for now, in Sri Lanka, there are around 225 elderly care centers. Out of those, 220 are privately run, which means only 5 of them are state-run. Interestingly, 50% of the existing elderly care centers in Sri Lanka is located in Western Province. So what about the rest of the country? Through this table, it can be understood that in provinces like Sabaragamuwa and Southern, elderly population is much more higher than the Western Province. So what are the existing regulatory aspects for elderly care services? In terms of elderly care services, there are 2 main acts for elderly rights and well-being. There are protections of the Rights of the Elders Act, which is introduced in 2000, and also the protections of the Rights of the Elders Act, which is introduced in 2011. Apart from that, in 2017, the National Elderly Health Policy of Sri Lanka was launched. Even though there are acts and policies, the implementation and the effectiveness of these laws and policies are rather limited due to the resource constraints the country is facing. So what can we do to change this? The first thing, the elderly care sector should be regularized by the state. And secondly, the state should increase their funding on more of the elderly care centers. As you can see, existing infrastructure is just 5 state-run elderly care centers. And thirdly, elderly care centers should be more accessible, not just for the Western Province, but for the rest of the country. And apart from that, it should be more affordable, but making sure that there is quality services being produced. So I'm going to hand over the presentation to Akhila.
Right, so let's talk about parental leave in Sri Lanka. We have 3 fundamental issues with how parental leave functions in Sri Lanka. The first is that there are a couple of discrepancies in legislation governing maternal benefits. Now, sure, in 2018, the Amendment Acts passed both the Maternity Benefits Ordinance as well as the Employees and Shops Act, tried to minimize the differences and to minimize any sort of discrepancy that would affect women in the way that they are allowed to claim their maternal benefits. But however, we still see that there are a couple of issues when it comes to the calculation of wages that can be paid. And secondly, currently the maternity leave benefits are entirely borne by the employer. And thirdly, we also find that there is no legislation recognizing or mandating paternal leave. So let's talk about what would happen if the state were to bear the cost of maternity leave. According to Verity Research, the estimated maternity leave benefit cost is about rupees 5.9 billion, which is approximately 0.5% of the 2021 tax revenue. If I am to compare it to the other welfares that the state invests in, some of the expenditure for 2021 was about 55 billion rupees, which is 4.2% of the 2021 tax revenue, and fertilizer subsidies came up to about 1.6% of the 2021 tax revenue, which is about rupees 21 billion. So what we want to point out is that the state can take this step that doesn't really make a huge dent in its portfolio, and can only lead to betterment for women, because we feel like the increasing labor force participation is something that is beneficial for all. And of course, if you look at countries like Singapore and Australia, they already run schemes like this. With parental leave, what we'd like to recommend is in twofold. The first, short term. We'd like to bring all maternal leave benefits under one statutory instrument. Granted, the current unified labor laws do attempt to bring it under one instrument, but other than just seeing the draft, we are yet to see any sort of concrete gazetting or any sort of steps taken in that way. Secondly, we'd also like to see the state fund maternal leave benefits. And if that's not completely possible at this stage, we'd like to see some sort of equitable share of this burden. Secondly, we'd also like to see the recognition of paternal leave to destigmatize and eliminate gender roles. Currently, there is a circular within public officers where public officials are granted 3 days of leave in the instance there's a childbirth in the family. But other than that, there's nothing really mandating paternal leave. So with that, we'd like to end our presentation, and we'd like to acknowledge these few key individuals for helping us with our research. And with that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Thatsarani and Akhila, for your presentation. And to commence the first panel discussion for today, I would like to start by introducing our panelists and moderator to the stage, starting off with Honorable Rosie Senanayake, who is the former mayor of Colombo and a Sri Lankan politician. She began her career by advocating for women's and children's rights. Her progression into political life began in 1995, and as the coordinating secretary of the United National Party's Women's Wing, she served as a member and a leader of the opposition in the Western Provincial Council. She became a member of the parliament in 2010, and in 2015, she became the State Minister of Child Affairs. She currently advises the President on local government affairs. She has worked as a UN Goodwill Ambassador, focusing on legislation against violence while supporting marginalized groups. Welcome, Honorable Rosie Senanayake. Secondly, Dr. Ramani Gunatilaka. Dr. Gunatilaka is an independent consultant specializing in the analysis of labor markets, income distribution, and subjective well-being in Sri Lanka and the region. Her recent work is focused on the labor market implications of Sri Lanka's multiple crises, the demand for women workers, Sri Lanka's care economy, and the migration and distribution of consumption in fishing communities in Cambodia, India, and Sri Lanka. She is currently researching the impact of Sri Lanka's multiple crises on micro, small, and medium enterprises. Welcome, Dr. Gunatilaka. Thirdly, Mr. Isuru Gunasekara. Mr. Gunasekara is an Executive Vice President of the John Keels Group and the Group of Chief People Officer and the Head of Sustainability, Enterprise Risk Management, and Group Initiatives. He joined the group in 2001 and into the new Business Development Division, and thereafter he headed the group initiatives and projects for the transport sector. Prior to his current position, he was the CEO of John Keels Logistics, the group's third-party logistics company, for 10 years. Before joining the group, he was attached to JP Morgan Chase in Sri Lanka and Citigroup in the US. Welcome, Mr. Gunasekara. Fourthly, Ms. Gayani De Alves. Ms. De Alves is the Vice Chairperson of WCIC. Ms. De Alves is a supply chain management professional. She is a strong advocate of women empowerment and a member of the NHRDC National Task Force to develop a strategy to increase female labor force participation in public and private sector. She is also a Women Advisory Committee member of the Ministry of Skills Development and Vocational Training. Welcome, Ms. De Alves. Finally, I would like to welcome on stage our moderator for today, Niroshi Pereira. Niroshi is the head of applied research at Frontier Research Private Limited. She holds an MSc in Poverty, Inequality and Development from the University of Birmingham, UK, where she attained an Chevening Scholarship granted by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, UK, in 2021. Her undergraduate dissertation at the University of Colombo explored the same while attempting to value the care economy in her hometown, Nigambo, through experimental methods. Her research interests are in the broad spectrum of inequality economics with a focus on consumption and class inequality and the care economy. Welcome, Niroshi. There will be a Q&A segment after the panel discussion. You can send in your questions through slido.com using the hashtag WPAN or by scanning the QR code displayed on the screen. I will now hand it over to the moderator. Niroshi, over to you.
All right, so starting off, I think we have enough context on how much of a care burden is borne by women. But I'd like to start off with Dr. Ramani, if you can speak about it in terms of your research and how much of this care burden is actually borne by women and whether that has an actual impact on the labor force participation of women.
Thank you. Let me start with the second question first. And I think in the presentation which preceded this session, it was made quite clear using data from the DCSS time use survey that women spend a lot more time than men on care work. My research goes back to about 2013. I used HIES and labor force survey data of 2012. And I think the key thing about that study was that I managed to disaggregate the impact of different groups of factors or characteristics on the probability that a woman would participate in the workforce. If you take the probability as 1, right, or 100%, then care work proxied by the demographic composition of the household accounted for about 10%. Fairly large, but not so large. What were the big guys in there? Location, then the demographic characteristics of the individual, like age, ethnicity, location, particularly plantation sector, urban, rural. The plantation sector, women were more likely to participate than urban women. So it went like that. So, of course, one is limited by the data one has. So this data was a household data set, and you have only characteristics relating to the household. We should not forget, though, that overall, I would say that the biggest impact, the biggest determinant of women's participation in the workforce is the macroeconomic environment. If the economy is not generating a sufficient volume of work, not just for women, but for men, then other policies which are implemented can have only a very marginal effect. And there's a lot of analyses on other countries, like Western countries, where the key factor in most Western societies was the war. The First World War and the Second World War, which pulled women into the workforce, and then, of course, you got the economic growth going, the engine kept running, and then women got pulled in. So our engine has been limping along for a very long time. So care work, yes, is important, and the issue of elderly care is going to become more and more important. And we need to think of what sort of models we should try to address this issue.
Yeah. So in terms of that, at a glance, it feels like, okay, let's look at care work and let's look at what's available right now to address the care work that's required. So, Honorable Rose, if you can comment on Do you think there's sufficient childcare facilities available? And what do you think about state provision of those facilities?
Not at all. Actually, if you watched the presentation earlier, which Akhila made, it was very evident that it is not sufficient. And that's one of the reasons to the female labor force participation hasn't gone beyond 30% or 35%. And this is one of the main factors amidst all the others like transportation, flexible working hours, etc. I think all care services should be universal and comprehensive, which can address the individual's needs. But however, I think we need to also look at the more marginalized and the vulnerable, even though policies always are for everyone. I don't think we have enough policies and whatever, even if you take the elderly care. There is, Thatsarani presented the Elderly Care Protection Act. Even though we have an act, we need to regularize. So regulations, policies, and also having a care industry put in place, a professionalized care industry with professional qualifications. All that I think matters. So we are not still there, and that's one of the reasons to why we even are having this dialogue today.
So we understand that it's not sufficient, but let's look at what's already available. So if I could direct a question at Ms. Gayani. So what do you think about the quality of childcare services that's available, and what should be done to improve it?
Yes, thank you for that question. So, I mean, as we all know that we don't have the adequate number of facilities in the country, and that's also clustered in the Western province. So I think in 2018, IFC did a study with a few companies. So I will just draw my conclusions from those to explain, because I don't have visibility on the whole country's information. That's another problem in this country. So in these 10 companies who really shared their experiences, so if you look at the two aspects, how are you going to set up the facility? Is it going to be your own facility? Are you going to use another party to run the facility on your behalf? Or you're going to use a shared facility where you have these childcare facility providers, you do that, or you work with a consortia, like in the free trade zone, you have many companies, so you agree and do that. So that's the model. So we need to first decide on what the model that you need to follow. The second thing is we also look at all stakeholder interests as well. You have a parent, you have the employer, you have the provider, and also the government agencies, because they are the ones who have to regulate this whole structure. So what is important is, in some countries, again, we saw in the research that most of the facilities are available from around 8 to 7, not beyond that. So that, again, a huge restriction, because especially in certain industries, KPO, BPO industries, or many other factory operators and all of that, you may not have the opportunity. Whereas in some companies, they are allowing, if you agree with the provider well in advance, exceptional situations can be managed. So what most of these organizations are doing, common, the issue with all of these and the positive things that they have implemented are that you need to first ensure a trusted facility. That's the number one. Because parents, especially in our kind of a country, we are used to keeping children with our parents or under somebody's care rather than putting into a place where you don't have any trust. So you need to ensure that. That is the number one aspect. So you need to ensure that you recruit a credible party who has this qualification or ability to do this, and that is something that we need to really look at. The other thing is you give access to the parents. So in most of the companies, some of the companies, you create a WhatsApp group with the parents, and you have the ability to influence the things that they do there. And maybe you have CCTV, and from your phone you can check at any time what's happening there. So you have kind of peace of mind there. So you give that confidence to the parents that the children are, taken care of properly. And in another challenge that most parents had was like, after they come back from school, how are you looking after that? not only the younger kids, but that also. In some of these companies like Celine and FG Serum and some of the companies, they have actually provided that facility. So you need to also look at that aspect. So the problem is a bit complex. The resources are limited in the country. So how do we really understand each stakeholder needs? Plus, if you look at the regulator, you need to also make sure the private sector has to be incentivized. Maybe tax credits that should be given so that they will be more, happy to do that. Plus, also, how do you really ensure the quality of the facility? And that we will talk about later on, I think. So we need to ensure how do we really regulate the facility so that you have a standardized system across the country. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to pivot into, because she just brought in the private sector and its involvement. How should we incentivize them? So, Mr. Isuru, you're from John Keel's group. And as a private sector employer, how do you think, what have you done differently that the rest of the private sector could maybe get an example of?
Sure, thanks, Niroshi. Of course, I think we are all clear that it's absolutely important to have access to quality childcare. But I think for John Keel's, what we did really was start off with a bigger purpose, because I think a lot of these things are initiatives to get to a bigger goal, but have to be complemented along the way with various other initiatives and programs. So at John Keel's, we consolidated all our diversity, equity, inclusion programs under one brand, which we call 1JKH in 2020. And put them under three very key pillars. One was achieving gender parity, and a goal. We have a 40% goal by 2026. We are 33% now. We started 28% 3 years ago. The second one is being inclusive of the LGBTIQ community. And the third one is increasing career opportunities for those persons with disabilities. Under the gender parity goal, the 40% is a number, right? And I think we need to go into a little bit more detail. We start off with 50% females, and then as you go up the ladder, we have the leakage in the female talent pipeline at around mid-management level. So you need to really not only talk about the numbers, but you need to see where we need the women is really in the mid-management level and the C-suite. So what is it that we need to do? So we started a raft of different initiatives. One was to increase female participation in non-traditional roles, which is where we have less than 20% female participation. We have female mentoring policies, sponsorship programs, female-centric training, flexi work hours, parents networks, where we have parents, young parents or parents-to-be are able to talk to each other to understand how they have continued to be in the workforce. So providing access to quality childcare was one of those. At the moment, we have given access to 9 facilities, and as Gani very clearly mentioned, they have to be quality. So all the facilities of being able to watch your children while you're at work is there. So it started slow, and I think we also started during end of COVID and then the economic crisis when there was not a lot of activity at that time. So currently, we have about 30 mothers who are taking advantage of this facility. So it's a slow start, but I think the confidence levels also rise when people are able to talk about the experience and how they're able to really use this facility, and we're hoping it will have a snowball effect. But I think this, the quality childcare is one element of where we want to get, and it has to be supported by so many other things we need to do, by mentoring, by having female forums, female leaders speaking about the experiences, pulling the youngsters in, and ensuring and explaining to them and teaching them, educating them on how they are balancing careers. And an organization has to play a very big part in that process. So it is absolutely important, but a part of a larger purpose and goal.
Yeah, so I was just looking at some of the questions we've received on our Slido. I know we were supposed to take questions at the end, but I felt like this is very relevant to what the conversation is right now. So someone from the audience has asked, corporates have introduced childcare services in their companies. Is state regulation and accreditation a way forward, or will it hinder accessible care? So I would like both Ms. Gayani and maybe Honorable Rosie, if you can give an answer to that.
Yeah. No, I think it's a must. I mean, if you want to really, it is a must. So I think we should not be worried. I think you should be happy that some, regulation is there and regulatory mechanism is in place to do that. I don't know whether you want answers to that as well. What needs to be done?
Yes, actually, you can elaborate.
So probably you might have to look at, qualification for, nannies and all these teachers who are in these childcare facilities, and maybe tertiary and vocational education commission. Those programs have to be accredited programs, and the providers have to be there who will be administering those programs, so that, the nannies and teachers who are actually managing these facilities will be trained and they are qualified. It's like any other school teacher, right? So you need to have that mechanism in place. And at the same time, government also have to have policies in place in how to set up a facility, what are the mandatory requirements that you need to have, all of that.
So if I may interject, if I come from a completely novice point of view, are there any regulations right now for childcare and elderly care in terms of quality?
There are regulations for basically preschools and daycares.
Yes.
But whether that is being
Enforced.
imposed, and basically whether it's been accepted, because we haphazardly done childcare centers and daycare centers. Whether they actually adhere to the regulations is a question. So that's where the government has to be very strict in what kind of regulations, the policies, and who are the implementers, and is there a follow-up on these regulations and whatever that the government has imposed.
So in terms of, as someone who's in the system, do you think the government has the capacity to actually implement that sort of?
Of course it has the capacity. I think every government, like I said earlier, care services should be universal and comprehensive, and the government has the capacity. Whether the government has gone to the extent, you should have had a couple of ministers sitting here and answering these questions. Maybe the Women and Childcare Minister should be answering these questions. Yes, the government has the capacity, the government should be doing this, and that's the only way, like I said earlier, we need to establish a care industry, a professionalized care industry, and that's exactly what you were saying. They have to be trained, they have to be professional, they have to have a qualification. So that is absolutely, and that will create jobs as well as it will serve also the purpose.
Yeah. So moving a bit further away from that conversation, back to legislation. Ms. Gayani, currently right now, there are multiple statutory or legislative instruments that look at this. Would it help if all these came under one umbrella so that you at least know it's one thing governing the other?
Yes, actually that is true. As you all know, we have three legislation, so Maternal Benefits Ordinance, then Shop and Office Act, and ILO 183C Convention and all of that. So each piece of law has discrepancies. So just before coming here, I had a chat with the Labour Ministry, one of the advisors who was a panelist last time here. So I'm happy to say that he said most of the, during the consultative phases of the discussion to change the labour law and put everything under one umbrella, has actually been agreed. So that's really good. Out of the 13 are being put in under one umbrella. So that's very welcome news. So that means everything will be considered, especially the maternal benefits also will be considered under that. So when you have three different laws governing maternity benefits, then it is going to be very confusing. After all, we may know in all three areas. So that's another thing. So what is important is, can the government bear the benefit of that? So as per the ILO convention, it talks about insurance funds. So can we private-public partnership? Because at the moment, sometimes maternity is considered a cost to the company. I mean, not all responsible companies, but there are some companies, when a woman is coming for an interview, you always have this unconscious bias that, okay, will I have to give her maternity leave, and that will be a deterrent for women getting into the world of work. So when you have incentivization happening, then that is taken away from the decision-making process. So more women will have the opportunity to get into the world of work. So sure, yes, that is going to be a positive thing, and that has to be done, and that is happening. Hopefully that will pass through, and that's our hope as well.
Okay, there's some good news there that we can then move on to. In the sense, we've now had quite a comprehensive discussion on childcare, the facilities available, and how the private sector is trying to move ahead. In terms of elderly care, which was also a component of the research, Dr. Ramani, if you could maybe elaborate a bit more on what the elderly care population is going to look like and how this is going to have an impact on women as well.
That's a good question, and actually, while the emphasis in this discussion has been on childcare, I think in a way we are a little out of step with the reality, because the data you showed is already, I think, significantly out of date because of the crisis. With the economic crisis, people are going to have fewer children. More young people are going abroad. So, in terms of childcare and elderly care, although in 2017 the data showed that people are spending more time on childcare than on elder care, in fact, that survey didn't capture enough observations of the elderly population. I think things have changed, and the whole situation is going to get worse. The other thing, though, with elderly care is that, and even with childcare, we are thinking in terms of institutions, sort of centralized sort of places. That's fine for John Keels, because you have a workforce which is at the upper end of the skills spectrum, most of it, and they will be traveling into Colombo, maybe, and then you have the creche. For most people, say people traveling by bus, I mean, how do you travel with children, babies, toddlers, and the kind of enterprises they work for may be too small to bear the costs of having a creche as well. So then we need to decentralize the whole thing. And in fact, what I have learned about other countries, like Australia, like Switzerland, they have this system where you have kind of home mothers, or there's that sort of thing, where you have women who are already at home, who are homemakers, and who during the day look after children of neighbors, and they are registered with the local authority, and there is inspection, and there is monitoring by the local authority. I think that would be a more practical solution. And even for elders' care, there I think the issue is prevention. People are living longer, and their morbidity levels are high. They are not living, their health situation is often, it doesn't allow them to live an independent life. They need help quite early on, and our society is developing more problems like dementia, age-related illnesses, which require more care. So in that kind of situation, you need to have an alternative approach. I think you have to make sure that you put in systems which will enable elderly people to be as independent for as long as possible, and kind of support them, so that you look after them in their home environments, but with support. That is going to make it less costly. But then again, you have to have a cadre of trained people, like physiotherapists and so on, who make visits. Now, we already have a cadre of, these not maternity. There are these. There's a cadre of people who go to houses, families where there are children, and they weigh midwives, right? There is a system. Officers. We already have a system like that. So I think we need to augment that system and reorient it, or widen its scope, so that they address the issues of old age as well. Because I can't see any other sort of affordable way to tackle this gargantuan problem that we are going to face. I mean, you saw that chart with the barrel shape was bad enough. Now we are going to we are getting a pyramid standing on its head.
That's actually a really interesting insight. Yeah. So, Ms. Gayani, do you have anything to add in terms of, she mentioned the crux of the problem, and it's really good insight. But is there anything that the private sector can do? I understand what she mentioned about, like the midwifery system. Is there anything that the private sector maybe look at? We've looked at childcare, we're getting somewhere with it. Is there anything we can do for the elders?
It's a tough question, but I think if we have flexible part-time kind of work arrangements, and the government now is also building into the labor law system and all that, that will actually help, to a greater extent will help. That again, the burden will come onto the woman, but I think we need to also change that attitude, and shared responsibility should be the way forward. But I mean, apart from that, in a resource constraint, of course we are a wonderful country, but unfortunately currently we are having issues. So in this kind of a situation, I don't see any other way to look at it. We have to look at out of the box thinking, in a very cost-effective way to do these things. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of out of the box and people who are looking ahead, in terms of JKH, we read and we were shown that JKH gives paternity leave for 100 days, almost same as what a woman would get as maternity leave. So how have you implemented it? What sort of cost is this looking like? Or is it significantly different to what letting a woman go on maternity leave would cost you? And why have you taken that step?
So I think it's one of the possibly the boldest steps that we've taken in terms of driving the message of the importance of it. So there are three or four key elements to this. One is to highlight the importance of the father's role in early childcare. And this doesn't come easy, and we had to have a lot of awareness sessions. We had the family planning unit come and talk to all our people to really talk about what the father's role is. And we didn't want it to be where the father goes and goes on trips with their friends. So we want to make sure that people understood why we were doing it, and believe it or not, it's not something that comes naturally to all of us, especially in our culture, where we expect the mother and the female to be the caregiver. That was one. The second one is to take away the stigma when hiring women, and unconscious bias sometimes could be even conscious. To take away that element of, she's going to go on maternity leave, is there going to be a cost, are they going to come back? Now that's a clean slate, it's a clean sheet, whether you hire a man or a woman, they have the potential of going on parental leave, so it's a clean slate. The third one is we wanted to make an impact outside the John Keells group. Essentially what we were trying to do was to help females who are working outside John Keells go back to their respective workplaces when the father who works at John Keells goes to be the caregiver. So our policy is that the father has to take the 100 days within the first 200 days of the birth or adoption of the child. And we encourage that 100 days to be after the mother takes that 100 days, because technically encouraging that female to go back to work. Since we launched it in October 2022, it's been 10 months, we've had 250 instances of parental leave, and 175 of that has been men. Wow. It hasn't been without its challenges, as you can imagine. For example, we have the leisure sector, which is represented only by 15% females. So you can imagine when we implemented this, and then 85% of the people who they never thought would take parental leave suddenly went on parental leave. You talk about restaurant managers, chefs, sous chefs, housekeeping. These are singular roles, and we had to do a lot of planning to have contingencies, succession planning, team building, and as evident as it is when a female is pregnant, we don't quite know if the father doesn't come and tell us, look, my wife is pregnant, we wouldn't know. So we had to do a lot of planning. We also built a parent toolkit to have conversations with the people taking leave, to ensure that we understood what it is that they needed to do during the time they were on leave, and when they came back, to ensure that they came back. Sometimes females would say, look, I don't want to be copied in on any emails. Sometimes they do because there is a fear of being out of touch with work, and suddenly you feel alienated. So we wanted to have those conversations. In 2016, 2017, we had only 50% females coming back after parental leave, and now it's 100%. But it's not without its challenges, and I think the trick here is to ensure they continue to stay in the workplace, because sometimes you come back after 1 year and you suddenly find that things are tough and they need to go back and leave their jobs. So flexible working arrangements, remote working, whatever it is that we can do, we want to make it a success. So far, it's been good. And hopefully it will resonate with the rest of the corporate sector as well, because we represent 7 or 8 sectors, and we are saying, look, if we can do it, you can do it too. And I am aware of many companies that has either introduced it the first time or increased their paternity leave after what we did. So hopefully there is an impact, and we're hoping it will be successful.
So one constraint as to why the private sector might not get on board with this program is the cost of the maternity leave and paternity leave benefits. Honorable Rosie, when you were the mayor, I just wonder, have you had any conversations where the state has ideally expressed a willingness to bear that burden, or have there been any conversations?
Bear the burden of?
Of the maternity leave benefits.
No, we haven't had because the local government is totally
separate,
independent, under the 13th Amendment. No, I've never had a conversation. But we do have our own daycares and creches run by the council. We also, when we talk about, I think it was mentioned that, it has to be basically a life cycle approach from death to, from birth to death, because the PHI, the public health officer, only goes and looks after the child or the mother and whatever, but not the elderly population. Traditionally, the elderly population were taken care of by the family, but today, with nuclear families, urbanization, migration, in this 21st century, it is absolutely important that we look at a care industry focusing on the elderly care as much as we are focusing on the basically children, early childhood education and development. Elderly care is also of paramount importance. So as a result of that, under the Colombo municipality, we still do give 13,000 families elderly care relief every month, starting from 1,500 to 2,500 rupees. It goes on till about 5,000 rupees, depending on the family, for the elderly care. This is for people above a certain age. So we have had programs specifying on elderly care. We do have an elderly home that's run by the CMC. We do have a children's home run by the CMC. And we do have our own preschools. I must say John Keels have been very generous and helped me to build a multidisciplinary community center which addresses not only a daycare and a preschool. It also helps, it has a facility to help women, to empower women, whether it's with their livelihood programs or any other program. And it also helps the children in the neighborhood to have basically library facilities for them to come back and sit and study in the afternoons, because they live in very small spaces and they do not have the facility to come back home and even do their homework in their own homes. So we do have community centers, which are multidisciplinary community centers, where the children would come and do their homework. They have a library, they have computers. One such community center was donated by John Keels to us. So these are some of the facilities that we do offer, but no, we have never had this dialogue with regards to maternity leave.
Yeah. So in terms of, there are many interesting questions on the website. There was a question which is a bit, I think, not very orthodox. So if I were to ask the question, it says, if the panelists were to give just one decision the government can take and just one decision the private sector can take, what would those be? So maybe Ms. Gayani can start.
I would feel incentivize the private sector through a tax credit or something, right? Mm-hmm. From the government side.
From the government sector.
Yeah.
So from the private sector, if Ms. Tisru can go.
Well, I'd ask the government again to mandate parents' leave. Yeah, I think the organizations need to also be a bit more progressive. I know that we spoke about a cost, and I think, I think we have the luxury of being a large corporate that has deeper pockets to manage some of these costs, and I think that definitely is a factor. But there has to be some assistance from the government, but I think the private sector needs to start taking steps towards it in whatever form or fashion, and sort of create a trend. We have the opportunity of being one of the most progressive countries in the South Asian region if we do that, and we are very well poised for that, so I think.
In terms of how we are doing against our peers, Dr. Ramani, have you by any chance done any research in terms of how elderly care work to match up to what the elderly care requirements look like? How have the rest of the world progressed, and how are we lagging behind?
Well, we are in a peculiar situation. We have become old while we are still poor. And with the economic crisis, we have become poorer.
Yeah.
So we are really in a very difficult situation. If you look at South Asia as a whole as well, none of the other countries is in the situation we are in. India has a large young population. Basically, they are bursting at the seams. Pakistan, young, Bangladesh, they have large markets. They have looked, and also they haven't eaten the fruit before growing the tree, which is what we did. We taxed our plantation sector and provided not just free health and education, all sorts of other subsidies. We didn't grow our exports. So we are paying for a lot of policy mistakes that were made, and the lack of vision by our policy makers. So at this point in time, I think the most important thing is to get the economy going. Yeah. Because without that, you're not going to get revenue. I mean, tax breaks, tax subsidies, forget about it. I mean, the government doesn't have enough money to give some sort of help, even to SMEs, which employ about 80% of the workforce. And many of them have bitten the dust. We need to look at it in a different way, and I think the private sector, those who can afford, and I'm not saying that everyone can, even the garment sector is in trouble, and that is because our export markets are heading into trouble. So things are not easy at all, but we really need to find our own solutions and make whatever resources we have go a longer way, which also means looking at how we are spending money. Are we making sure that there are no leakages? These are things which every level of government needs to look at. So I think without fixing those issues, we can't deal with this unique problem we have. We are I think the third fastest aging population in Asia. The other two are Japan and South Korea.
Yeah. Sorry, I need to interject just to make an announcement. If the owner of the vehicle CBL 8585 is in here, your vehicle is blocking the road, so the police would like you to move your vehicle. Oh, doesn't seem like it. So yes, moving forward on that, in terms of elderly care facilities, one issue we see is that while there are accessible elderly care facilities in Colombo, obviously geographical disparity is a problem here, how affordable are these? And have there been any conversations on elderly care facilities and their affordability? Since Honorable Rosie already mentioned some efforts by the municipality in providing some, what has your take been on this?
I mean, what I mentioned earlier was we do give poor relief to the elderly care, and we do have a few elderly home, just one elderly home that we run. I really don't know how affordable the private sector is. There are a few quite comprehensive, well-run elderly care, but that is to a niche crowd. So you can't basically generally take that as a given for, taking care of elderly care. If I may answer that question that came to you about what would we, so I would personally, and this was something that I had been working on when I was the Minister of Child Affairs as well, would request the government to bring early childhood development under the free education system. Because if you had looked at the presentation Akhila made, 70% of kids have access to early childhood development, 30% education, 30% do not have access. And when I was the minister, I intervened and got a grant from the World Bank, $50 million to support that. But I had then spoken to the then Prime Minister, the present President, in what is it that is stopping us? For me, building brains, building future, the UNICEF concept of developing the early childhood education and development is of paramount importance if we are to have a very strong workforce in the country and if you're looking at future. That's why I said life cycle approach from birth to death is very important. And I would request the government to bring the early childhood or the preschool system under the education system and to give it free. Because I must say, we cannot compare ourselves with India or any other country. India is the 5th largest economy in the world. But when it comes to gender indicators with regards to education and health, we top the list in this region. We are better than Pakistan, India, or any other country. So we need to be thankful for the little things that we have and also to see how we could improve upon that. In bringing the early childhood education or the preschools into the free education system, we could also develop the daycare systems through that as well. So I would like to see the government do that and make sure that every child has an opportunity, because it is being said the first 5 years is very crucial. 75% of a child's brain is developed in the first 5 years. And what are we doing to enable that child to be a very strong individual in the future? So building brains, building future, to me is very important. And I would love to see the government actually bring in the early childhood education into the free education system.
So in terms of that conversation about childcare facilities versus elder care facilities and what the government can do, Ms. Gayani, in terms of your involvement with the Women's Chamber of Commerce, what sort of, let's say based on your casual conversations or how you've approached the government, what sort of burden in terms of childcare versus elder care would you say that the women currently face? And how does that inhibit their upward social mobility?
I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics available with me, but what we have started is, like, you have a lot of, Middle Eastern remittances is one of the top foreign exchange earners for this country. So we don't want these women to go out of the country. It's a social problem also. So what we have started initiative where how we can get these women who are leaving when they come back, reskill them, and because they are used to a particular way in an overseas country, so they are better than the others, rather than, because we have a skill shortage also in the elderly care and child care facilities. So how can we train them? So we've done a first series of programs, but we wanted to now continue, and with the tertiary and vocational ministry, we want to do some work there. So something like that is what we have already started, where we would equip them, these women who are going, so that they will not go again, so that they will be with their families, plus they will be gainfully employed as well. So that's something that we are working on, yeah.
That's actually a fantastic idea, to reintegrate the migrant woman worker when she comes back to be more purposeful, and also she will have an income in that sense.
And dignity of labor is another thing, because even our domestics, how many of us are willing to give a decent salary for them and EPF, ETF? That's another conversation altogether. Yeah. So how can we really integrate? So these problems are already there. I think labor reforms are going to to factor all these things as well. I think in our own little way we can start a small thing so that it can make a big difference in a constrained environment. Yeah?
Yeah. So in terms of most of the facilities that we've discussed, this is mostly formal sector driven. We understand the women who are formally employed, and we understand that they deserve care facilities. But if we look at the informal sector, for those women, how are we going to ensure that they also have access to these kinds of things? So for example, let's say the private sector provides creche facilities, or they provide parental leave, which gives them that way to go ahead. But in terms of the informal sector, we do not have a way to regulate it. We do not know what these women are doing. Then how do we make sure that they are given those?
Yes.
The question was directed at Dr. Ramani.
Sorry, doctor.
If you have an idea about the formal versus the informal sector.
Right, and caregivers.
Yes.
Well, it's. I have looked at the data again based on time use, and informal care is basically provided by the family. Formal care is provided in institutions. The numbers are very small. The numbers thrown up by the labor force survey is such that you can't even do a rigorous analysis. If you look at unpaid care, though, 5 million Sri Lankans are providing unpaid care for their families, children and elders, and of them, 3.5 are women. 3.5 million are women. So if you are looking at, say, informal workers who, say, visit the home, and very small percentage, because most people can't afford. And even in terms of elder care, the facilities that you get, they are mainly for people whose children have migrated. And they are earning dollar incomes, and they are prepared to pay a substantial amount to look after their parents. And there may be 3 or 4 children clubbing together. So that is a completely different market. And I would say that is fairly looked after. The other segments, they are the ones with the problems. And also you have to factor in things like the cost of medicine. You know, you go to the government hospital, maybe you can see a doctor and all that, but they don't provide you with medicines anymore. And then how about the other necessities of being old, being incontinent? You know, you have to look after all those. How are those issues going to be managed? Who's going to, who can afford that? And then even when care is provided in the home, I mean, it is very difficult for a caregiver to go on doing the same thing. So there has to be an issue of at least affordable respite care. But do we have even that? I really think, I am not likely to be living until 2060 when, you know, the pyramid turns completely upside down. But we are heading for a very, very difficult time.
Yes, on that very grim note, we will wrap up our panel discussion. But we will now open up for questions. So if you all have any, you can either use the app or raise questions. We have a mic at the back.
I also forwarded the question to you. Sorry, I don't remember the name, but for Ms. Isuru, yeah. At John Keels, you said currently there are 30 mothers using the facility. Can you tell me a bit of statistics, how many women are there? I'm just concerned why the number is so low, because it's a huge group. I mean, like, so many companies are there. What do you see as a reason for the number to be that low? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So the first thing is that we just started at the beginning of this year, And the concept of using creches and the logistics around it, as Dr. Ramani also very clearly mentioned, is not easy. Who comes, who drops, who picks, what time can they go and pick up and drop? So it's not for everyone. And I think for the longest time, we've been discussing this for over 10 years about providing creche facilities. And the answer has always been, how can we do an equitable job for everybody? And that was one of the reasons we never got off the pedal, right? We never started because we said we're 15,000 employees in hotels all over the country, in supermarkets all over. How do we create a system where everybody has access to it? And that was one of the reasons of the inability to create an equitable service, was why we didn't also start it. Then we took a call saying, let's start it, right? Let's just get off the blocks. Let's provide it where we can. Let's at least help who we can, and then let's see how it goes. So I think the number 30 is, 5 is better than nothing, right? 30 for us is actually, success. We hope that 30 will grow. At the moment, we've tied up with 4 partners. And once the numbers grow, we hope to do it on our own. But then there are service providers. There's not so many people who can provide that, who are educated enough to provide that care. So there are constraints. And we don't want to sort of, put all our eggs into one basket and, have it not succeed. So I think that number 30 is a success for us because we will help 30 people actually come back to work. So we hope that number will grow. But I think in principle, what's important is to keep building on this.
Any further questions or follow-ups on that?
This question is for Madam Rossi. We are from teacher unions, and the subject you mentioned about preschool education being brought under the free education system is something we have been pressurizing for so long. And there are a lot of problems in that sector. And we were very happy to hear that you have the same ideas. So how do we go about it, trying to get the government to implement this? It is a very important thing because there are a lot of problems in the preschool sector. The teachers, they don't have proper salary scales, no retirement benefits, no leave, none of the rights that are enjoyed by other teachers. So there are a lot of problems, and we would very much like to get together with you to work in this area.
Okay, so there's a member of parliament here. The Women's Caucus has a big role to play in pushing these policies through. And I have worked very closely with Dr. Sudarshini Fernando on women's issues because we have all kinds of discriminatory laws which we are trying to eradicate and whatever. But this is something that I'm very passionate about. And apart from the Women's Caucus, we need to have a dialogue on this. And also I remember when I spoke to the then Prime Minister, the current President, on this, he said, wait, because we had some other issues at the time. Let's talk about it later. And of course, we went out of power. Now he's back the president, so I'm hoping that, we will have a very favorable answer, depending on, the financial constraints, et cetera, But I think the Women's Caucus also has a very big role to play in pushing these policies. Yes, go ahead. A mic here, please. There's a mic behind you.
I think that was a very valid question. Yeah. I don't represent the government, but I was there at a meeting which discussed about educational reforms. And there's a proposal to cluster the preschools, to cluster the schools and the surrounding preschools into a sort of a school. So the government is very keen on reforming the holistic education and improving the quality of the preschools as well.
That's good. Any other questions? We can take around 2 more. If not,
since Dr. Sudarshini Fernando is here, I was about to make a request, maybe back again through the Women's Caucus. You know, we have a very good primary healthcare system, but with the demographic transitions right now that is happening, it has been said in 2037, elderly population will be above 22%. And a majority of that would be also females, because the female life expectancy is higher than the male. So we need to have some structural changes in the healthcare system. And since Dr. Sudarshini Fernando is the former State Minister for Health as well, looking at, you know, elderly care, social welfare and health welfare, all that together. So that is something that I feel that we need to really push forward, you know, structural changes in the primary healthcare system. Because like we said, we are only concentrating on, you know, the midwives going house to house looking after the pregnant mother and the child that is born and, you know, the child's welfare. But elderly care doesn't come under that. So a life cycle approach is important, and pushing this maybe.
Just to respond to that, the World Bank supported a program where the primary medical care units, that is the so-called dispensaries, they sort of tried to reorganize the primary medical care units, where now a medical officer of health has a designated population. So likewise, they identified designated populations and GN divisions for a particular primary medical care unit. And the main objective was to screen the population and provide elderly care, preventing them going into secondary and tertiary care hospitals where, you know, they are overcrowded. So that a referral system could be established. I know this project was implemented in about, not in the entire country, but in certain districts, and it was a very successful model. And we also proposed another officer to visit, you know, to provide, to identify at-risk population for non-communicable diseases, which is the highest cause of morbidity and mortality in the country. But of course, the present economic crisis will not permit the Ministry of Health to employ another category. So the main, initially the primary the public health midwife was recruited to provide family health care from birth to death, but since the workload with the maternal and child health was so huge, the elderly care, the palliative care was sort of taken out of her. So that is why we proposed another assistant, at least assistant nurse, a category, so that they could visit house to house, screen for non-communicable services, provide palliative care, especially elderly and disabled care. So it has been proposed, but yet to be, you know, with the present economic climate, I don't think. But, you know, I think that's a very, another category has to be introduced with the rapidly aging population. And also the elderly, now there are a lot of institutions providing elderly services, elderly care, but none of these are registered. So the present Elderly Care Act does not permit monitoring them, and if, because there are so many institutions. So we don't know the quality of services provided to the elderly care despite paying huge sums. So right now I know the Elderly Care Act is being amended so that the Divisional Secretary, the Grama Niladhari, will have more powers to sort of monitor the existing institutions providing residential care, and also there are other organizations providing sort of, you know, elderly care where even these places are not monitored for the training and the services provided, like, you know, for disabled people living with the families, you know, supportive care. So I think the Elderly Secretariat, with the amendment of the Act, these institutions, the organizations will be supervised and strengthened. I think it's a very important proposal, Honorable Rosie. Thank you.
I would like to add one thing about the economic crisis. We need to remember, you know, currently it is people who are, say, 50 to 60 years. If you are between 50 and 60 years old, then you are more likely to be providing care for an elder. Now, that is the age where you are developing your own health issues, right? And with the economic crisis, people can't afford to buy blood pressure medicine for glaucoma. So you can imagine what is going to happen when that age cohort becomes older. They will need more care because they will be sicker. So we really need to keep an eye on the impact that the economic crisis is going to have on all these issues.
Yes.
So I must mention, apart from the poor relief that we gave the elderly population, in the Colombo municipality, we do give free medicine to the non-communicable, to the not only the elderly, people in general, the underserved community, especially for non-communicable diseases and also maternity and from their vitamins to whatever. So that is something that the Colombo municipality, because we have a very strong public health department based in the municipality. Yeah.
They got to get registered in the social services.
Sorry, we don't have much time to take more questions. Maybe we will answer those later if we can take it up. Yeah. Before we wrap up, we would like to have one last question to end it all. So this question on equal pay, whereas why women resort to staying at home could also be because men and women, there's a discrepancy in equal pay. So how can private sector employers like JKH, for example, how do you look at that and how do you look at pay parity?
Yeah. So I think it's an important point. JKH remains an absolute meritocracy, and we do not look at the gender for pay. But I think the important thing here is to make the environment in an organization conducive for women to continue to be in employment so that you enlarge the talent pools that you can choose from to keep going to the top. So if you look at pay parity, I think, we've done this at JKH to look at the same job gender-wise, and there is no mismatch. I think the issue is at the senior levels, you find less females participating. And I think that's the challenge that we have to solve for. To make it more conducive, but organizations should remain meritocracy. That's what we believe, and it should not be because you are at a number. So that's important.
Yes, that's really insightful and actually important in this context. So I'd like to thank all the panelists for engaging, and that was really insightful, even for me, and also for the crowd for engaging as well. You all sent a lot of questions. They were all good. Sorry we couldn't take them all. And for the gentleman out there as well, I'll get your question later and direct it to the panelists after. So thank you all once again. We will now go to a short break and move to the next session.
Thank you all very much to the panelists and moderator for such an insightful discussion. We will now, as Niroshi said, move on to a short break before commencing the keynote speech and the second panel discussion. As you exit the hall, please do share your feedback. We do have a couple of team members with video cameras who will be recording your feedback, and also feel free to share your feedback in any language you feel comfortable with. Thank you all. See you in a bit.
As Albert Einstein once said, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. With its economy grinding to a halt, Sri Lanka, the pearl of the Institute, is committed to reviving Sri Lanka's economy through market-based policy ideas.
Move into our keynote speech. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker for today, Ms. Lakshmini Vijayasundara. Ms. Vijayasundara is the co-founder and CEO of Iron One Technologies and BMICH. She is a prominent Sri Lankan technology and entrepreneur focusing on elevating global recognition for Sri Lankan tech products. With a background in engineering from Imperial College London, Ms. Vijayasundara has achieved numerous awards, including Ernst Young's Winning Woman and SARC Women Entrepreneur of the Year. She envisions making BMICH a premier global brand for board meetings and maintains involvement in ICT initiatives and mentorship programs while serving on boards like ICTA Sri Lanka. Her emphasis on corporate culture has propelled BMICH to a top global ranking. Ms. Vijayasundara, over to you.
I can just use the... Yes. Thanks. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So as you all know, I'm Lakshmini Vijayasundara. I'm the founder of two tech companies, Iron One Technologies and BMICH. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about BMICH itself, which is, I think, quite interesting these days. So about me a little. So my passion is pretty much to grow world-class technology products. So I come from a tech background, and that is kind of my own passion, and really building things which are top of the range, top tier, and not really mid-scale or just existing. So this is quite a challenging thing for the people who I work with, and because I keep, breaking all boundaries. Okay, sure. So today, I'm going to touch on three areas while I share my story. The first is I'm just going to give you a glimpse, and some of you probably already know some of this and heard me or known me. So what I've achieved right now, just to give you an idea of where I am now. Then I'll also roll back and share how I got here. So there might be some interesting learnings for some of you in this. And then, of course, this is not my ultimate goal. I feel I'm almost still at the start, despite all of this. And I'll share a little bit of my vision and what it means to all of us being Sri Lankan, really. So here goes. Some of you may know this, but I see a lot of new faces for me in this audience. So I just like to kind of take it upon saying, do you know that there's a Sri Lankan company founded by and run by a Sri Lankan female entrepreneur that has Forbes, Global 2000 companies, Fortune companies around the world? Thank you. And so this is BMICH. So this is the company I founded a couple of years ago, and it's doing pretty well. I mean, from a Sri Lankan standpoint, I say that. From a Sri Lankan standpoint, we're doing well. But this is part of my journey. So as I mentioned, I'll just share some of the achievements right now so you understand where I stand. So there's actually beyond 1,000 global companies that use this solution called BMICH that we built. It's a totally Sri Lankan built product, but we have a dispersed global network of people in our company that sell this. So you'll see logos like Mercedes-Benz. I mean, this is not the demo that is distributing Mercedes here. It's Mercedes Germany. You see Ernst & Young, that is the global Ernst & Young from US and multiple countries, Petronas, which is the largest oil and gas company in Asia. And I mean, literally, when I say 1,000, all of them are of this caliber, like OCBC, Bank of Singapore, India. We have the Reserve Bank of India, their central bank. So my journey has always been lots of well-wishers coming and saying, like when I wanted to go to India, they would say, be careful, Lakmini, they're going to steal the code. So it's constantly sort of game like that. So this product is not just given to ordinary people. This is like the chairman and the top level people, like the governor of Central Bank of India, they use this Sri Lankan product. The OCBC chairman, like Deepak Parekh, who's the HDFC Limited MD. I mean, every single person here is like a superstar in their country and globally. And our team gets to provide the software as well as meet them on a regular basis. So, I mean, it's really incredible. Of course, we've won many awards, and I see Gayani and Women's Chamber, lots of people here. So, I won that Entrepreneur of the Year award back in 2016. That was superb. Picked up by Ernst & Young to give me that global award from Ernst & Young, and then, many awards. And we are also Asia's best workplace, and lots of things. Not just me, but my team as well. So as I mentioned now, to deliver this to like multiple people in multiple countries, we have a global team. So these are like South Africans, Indians, Malaysians, etc. So we are growing, and it's been a really exciting journey with global experiences. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna reverse back. I had to find these slides in an album, which is obviously not well kept. This is the first day in my garage when I started back then. So I studied maths. I studied in Sri Lanka in a local school. I saw multiple friends, and Roshan is one of my friends from school. So there, we had 4 people who did maths, just 4 people, out of a 90 people batch. This is the kind of women to men ratio that we had those days. We didn't know any better. We didn't think it was, I just thought girls don't like maths. That's my assumption, right? I went to university in London, UCL and Imperial. It was no better, really. It was like 10 out of 100. Again, I thought, even in UK, people don't like maths, like girls don't like maths. That was, what else do you think, right? I mean, no one's stopping you from doing maths. So that was the environment. I mean, when I came back, I started working in 2 companies. One was Selinco. They had a startup. It sounded really exciting, a startup doing satellite internet. Then thereafter, I joined Lankabell. I was an engineer. And, within a year, I was managing like a large team. It was like really great. But there was like a calling. I sort of felt that there was like a limit to me of what I could do. I thought there was more interesting things to do than what I did. So I wanted to start up. And I kept looking. I mean, I had some friends who were also having the similar interest. So I kept looking and looking, talking to like as many people who came from overseas, on Christmas holidays or whatever. And then it struck. So there was this Boston-based friend of a friend who had a business that they wanted a startup. So this is the garage startup we started. That's him over there. And this was my first team that we started out with. It was for stock trading at a time in Boston, in US, at a time that everything was paper-based. It was quite some time ago. Exciting, but then there was a crash, like almost within 12 months. There was a massive crash, a dot-com burst. I honestly didn't know like how to handle it, because at that time, really, I mean, when I went to Boston, the table was filled with checks that were uncashed, because there was no time to cash checks. It's like these were like thousands and thousands of dollars. It seemed like a time that time wouldn't end, like the success wouldn't end. And then, it was like completely a different world, and I had to start in this manner. And then when the dot-com crash happened, literally all our clients pretty much seized. Like they had gone back, this is stock market, right? Straight away they got seized, they didn't want the business. I had a team, it was a small team, but I just didn't have the experience that I have now on what to do. So with that, actually, we started, I don't know whether you all know, if you all are trading in Sri Lanka, there's a product called A-Trad that most of the brokers are using. So that's Iron One's, that's mine. We started that. So we pivoted, because I had to do something with this stuff. And over time, that expanded. But today's story is not that. Today's story is about BoardPack. So BoardPack actually also has a origin story that's very simple. Nations Trust Bank that everybody knows. Ajit, who was a board member from John Keel's in that, suddenly came and said, I am not coming to these board meetings if you give me paper. It was simply, that was a statement. So I got a call, because we are like in everybody's face over here, trying to figure out what business we can build again. And they said, Lakmini, could you do this? Because, my job is on fire right now, so the IT head. And we quickly put this together. We had no clue it'll be a global success. I had no clue. And we thought, I had done easily over 20 of that kind of models, which are at different stages. But this really took off. And then very soon we saw that Bank of Ceylon, all these companies just kept, as soon as it's like viral. Like the board directors talk to each other, everybody wanted it. So if you want to know what it is, for those who don't know it, boards usually use paper or email or some kind of very, very hazardous, unsecure way of taking very, very confidential information of their company to them. Most are non-executives, and they carry it in planes and all sorts of things. And it can be highly detrimental to the company, these large companies. And we digitized it. People had tried to digitize it before, but it was too hard for the board members to use it earlier. But we did it in a very, very easy manner, which was our success. So that's in a nutshell what it was. So Sri Lanka, it took off. And I was at Sri Lanka Telecom and Maxis Malaysia. There are board members there. It was like a passing invitation. Anything was, anything that came our way, we just grabbed. So I accepted the offer to go there. And then they're our partner, as well as, through them, we got like the first company we got in that country, in Malaysia, was their stock exchange. Then their central bank, their top banks, Yes Bank, all of them. Went to India. Of course, I was told to be careful not to go to India. The software industry is like too strong for us. Oh, we are number one there. So we have all the companies that matter. Went to South Africa. So similarly, at this point, like I said, in this journey, we've gone to like 4 or 5 countries, set up camp. We have companies from 40 countries virally. But as you can see, it's wide open. Like there's so much to be done. This is some interesting things, memorable events that we went to EY. EY is using us, so very, very interesting things. And here's my company. So we have, about 35% female participation. Outside we were talking about all these laws about females not being able to work after 8. We are aware of these, but we don't, I don't know whether I'm supposed to say this out loud, but we don't really follow these. Women and men, we act as if there are no laws discriminating us. Everyone's happy. It's up. We're not forcing anybody to do anything, but no one's blocked by us. The target is 50% to start with. I'm really happy to say that my senior team, like if you take my director of marketing, director of customer success delivery, they're females. And of course, the director of human resources, which is a popular area for females. So I have a very high senior population as well of female. So something I just want to mention is, this is a ranking that we look at internationally. And as I mentioned, we've come a long way. We've got like over, I think, crossing 1,000 companies of very, very large caliber. But having said that, my target is that BoardPack becomes the first unicorn in Sri Lanka. And for those of you who don't know what this term unicorn is, and think of the animal, it's a $1 billion valued company that is not listed yet. In the world, there's over 1,200 of them. Like India has close to 100. Majority is in the US. Sri Lanka doesn't have a single yet. We are now getting global funding. So our growth is going to be hugely accelerated. Without funding, we are number 3. But that's a lot of sweat and tears by me and my team to get to this, because we keep that product, top of the range. That we don't lose to these other players. It's just that we don't have the reach without the funding. We're getting the funding, and essentially, there are a couple of areas also that we decided that from a technology standpoint, everybody knows like AI and ESG. So there's a lot of that to revolutionize board meetings and board directors and corporates that we are putting in, so that no one can come anywhere close to BoardPack in the future along with this thing. So this is a screen. I think if you can see the screen, everybody knows ChatGPT now, right? So we are putting specialized chatting for board members to get to know about subjects that are very valid to them. It's never done before. So we are the first. We're currently launching all this stuff. And also the ESG. So like a lot of countries have decided that carbon, even India, like they have set carbon neutral timeframes. So board members have the decision-making power of it. And we are the people who feed all this information to these board members. So there's lots of exciting stuff going on. So again, this kind of comes to the end of my speech. I think timing-wise, I'm okay, isn't it? So, and in 2 books that I really like, they're not new. They've been there for a while. 0 to 1, Peter Thiel. I think a lot of you know him from the VC world of Facebook and things like that. So Peter Thiel has a theory about competition. So I don't have time to talk about it, but read up the synopsis of that. It's an interesting one that I follow. So BoardPack will not be in par with any competition. That's the plan. And of course, the Start With Why of Simon Sinek, that's another one, because we have to have a purpose. So my purposes are, there are a couple of them, because being Sri Lankan and being in Southeast Asia, woman, all that. So there are additional purposes, but beyond all that, we want to be like the number 1 in our category and become the player and take Sri Lanka software, Sri Lanka name, brand, to be up there, with the Forbes companies that are our clients. So I've taken 3 pictures here. Kasturi actually is really a role model for all of us in Sri Lanka. So I put her there, and also these other 2, like Indra and Mary Berry. I'm sure everybody knows them from their global achievements. So believe you can, and you are halfway there. So essentially, for me and for y'all, I think it's all about believing first, and once you believe, literally you start working towards it and getting it. So that's my story. And I wish you all well, and thanks so much for inviting me to come and speak with you all today. I enjoyed it. I hope it was useful for you all. Thank you.
Thatsarani. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Vijayasundara, for that wonderful talk. I would now like to invite Thatsarani Siriwardana and Chantal Dasanayaka of the Advocata research team for a presentation on unlocking women's potential in the digital economy.
Welcome to the second session of our conference, Unlocking Women's Potential in the Digital Economy. We will give you a brief overview about the research we conducted on how the digital economy can help improve the inclusion of women in economic activities. In our research, we focused on 4 areas that act as barriers for women aspiring to become digital entrepreneurs and women economic empowerment. They are lack of accessibility, affordability of digital devices and the internet, lack of digital literacy, and lack of robust digital payment systems in Sri Lanka. So why are we focusing on the digital economy? Women's participation in economic activities is low in Sri Lanka. Lack of access to digital devices and the internet hinder women from contributing to the economy. Thus, the digital economy can help improve inclusion of women in economic activities as it provides women with flexibility, multitasking, and revenue. In order to conduct a comprehensive research, we refer to literature conducted by local and foreign authors, conducted an empirical analysis using the Labour Force Survey Computer Literacy Survey 2021, LearnAsia After Access Survey 2019, and E-Commerce, a driver of inclusive growth in Sri Lanka 2023 by Daraz and Sluscom, and also conducted key informant interviews with industry professionals. In this presentation, we will focus on these 4 barriers. Firstly, in terms of access, the barrier of insufficient or substandard digital infrastructure affects access to the digital economy. It is evident that many areas in Sri Lanka lack coverage and download speeds are significantly low. In July 2020, the Director General of TRCSL, Oshida Senanayaka, stated that a total of 2,000 locations with weak signals, often referred to as dark spots, were identified throughout the island. Additionally, it was highlighted that 80% of the 152 Gram Niladhari divisions lacked broadband coverage. Although the internet service providers in Sri Lanka have 4G coverage in all areas of the country, our research and key informants from the interview stated that many individuals in the rural areas suffer due to signal issues and are not able to access the internet efficiently. The second barrier we have identified is the issue of affordability. Our analysis and key informant interviews shed light on the high cost of digital devices and the internet that act as a significant barrier to women's access to the digital world. From the survey conducted by LearnAsia After Access, it was found that 47% use smartphones. The rest either use a feature phone, which is 7%, or a basic phone, which is 46%. The probable reason for the low uptake of smartphones could be the cost issues. LearnAsia's internal computations show that mobile data services are unaffordable for 60% of the population. In addition, the survey data highlighted that 59.9% believe they do not need a smartphone and state that a feature phone or basic phone is sufficient for them. A possible reason for this could be the lack of awareness. 23% do not own a smartphone as they cannot afford one, as it is too expensive. This is concerning as a lack of access to digital devices hinders women's access to the digital realm and their participation in economic activities. Furthermore, while 29.2% did not have any limitation in accessing the internet, 24.9% of respondents in the Learn Asia After Access survey stated that the cost of data is too high. Internet services in Sri Lanka are taxed at 17.34%, with 2.04% cess and 15.3% VAT. IDD voice, inbound roaming, Wi-Fi and data-related services, which are mobile fixed broadband, are taxed at 20.36%. Now, in comparison to other countries such as Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Maldives, the internet services tax in Sri Lanka is quite high. Although the tax rate in India seems slightly higher than Sri Lanka at present, it must be noted that the tax in India before its digital transformation was low, aiding its citizens to access the internet. Furthermore, during the period leading up to the digital boom, India made massive efforts to improve digital infrastructure. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, has faced many fluctuations in internet service and telecommunication levies and still has substandard digital infrastructure. Over to you, Thatsarani.
Now let's focus on the literacy. So when understanding about digital literacy, we can understand it as two different components, computer literacy and digital literacy. In terms of computer literacy, a person is considered as computer literate if that person can use a computer on his or her own. So for example, a five-year-old child who can use a computer and play a computer game is considered as a computer literate person according to Sri Lanka's Liverpool survey. A digital literate person is considered as a person who can use a laptop or a smartphone or a tablet on his or her own. The rate for women seems positive even though the rate is lesser than their male counterpart. But it is important to identify the gap because even a smaller gap can lead to a disproportionate impact due to the existing inequality gap. A limitation that was observed in the analysis was that in the LFS definition, the provided definition in LFS is too broad because they're only focusing on a person can use, but they're not specifying in which activities that are being observed. Based on the analysis that we conducted, we also found out that there is an inaccurate reflection of digital and computer literacy. Even though the digital literacy rate is around 57.2%, usage in email and internet is quite low. Through this chart, it is clear that the technology adoption hurdle exists. Even if you have a device, you may not have the knowledge to use it efficiently. A survey done by Learn Asia have identified that when using internet, people spend most of their time on using social media. Usage of online shopping and internet banking is very low. Another barrier that can be identified is the absence of robust digital payment systems. More effective payment systems doesn't exist in Sri Lanka. So when we do a transaction, we use transfers from one bank to another bank. JustPay and Lanka QR exist as digital payment systems, but it is not being promoted in Sri Lanka. It is important to note that the lack of trust in digital payments act as the main barrier in terms of adopting digital payment systems. According to a survey done by Slascom and Daras, most preferred payment method is cash on delivery in terms of e-commerce. Debit card, credit card, online bank transfer system usage is quite low. This chart also shows the lack of trust in digital payment in Sri Lanka. When understanding the demographic profile of the online sellers, means the digital entrepreneurs, as you can see, the majority of the digital entrepreneurs are males. And also, mostly online businesses are carried out by the age category between 20 to 30. So, how can we use India's stack model as a very successful case study to Sri Lanka? India Stack is a collection of open application programming interfaces that unlock essential economic elements such as identity, universal digital payments, and data. It is a platform for enabling transactions and facilitating the provisions of goods and services. Aadhaar project was the initial system of India's stack model. This provides every Indian with a foundational digital identity, enabling them to access the benefits of the formal economy. For example, within just 5 years, over 1 billion Indians obtain an Aadhaar card. Aadhaar eKYC significantly reduced the customer onboarding costs for Indian banks. This played a crucial role in accelerating India's financial and telecom development. Aadhaar program has emerged as one of India's most effective tools in promoting economic participation, particularly among women. Between 2014 and 15, the rate of financial inclusion for Indian women increased by 24%, surpassing 14% increase observed among men. This is where India's stack model comes as a successful case study to Sri Lanka. So what can we do to kind of overcome all these barriers? In terms of access, improve coverage in areas around Sri Lanka, not just the urban areas, but you should also focus on rural areas. Improve infrastructure that enable high-speed internet and high download speed. In terms of providing more affordability, there should be public Wi-Fi hotspots. And to make digital devices more accessible, there should be a secondary market providing for smartphones. And also installment payments for devices should be introduced. Apart from that, payment for internet and data based on usage should be introduced, especially to kind of promote digital entrepreneurship. Exemption from telecom service charges based on business classifications should be given prominence. To kind of overcome the digital literacy barrier, we should teach IT, restructure the IT syllabus from the school itself, and encourage STEM education within among students and also within females mostly. Implement programs to teach basic IT skills and how to access digital financial services, as done by Suhuruliya, which is a program conducted by ICTA. Also, digital payment systems should be introduced, universal payment interfaces. Implementing digital identity system in Sri Lanka should be given priority. There are a number of ways by which these three different stakeholders can contribute as the government, as the corporate, and as the society as well. We would like to acknowledge these people who helped us in our research. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Thatsarani and Chantal, for that. We will now commence with the second panel discussion. So now I will introduce our panelists for today. Firstly, I would like to invite on stage Ms. Chiranti Kure. Ms. Kure is the Deputy General Manager, Sustainability and Corporate Communications at Hatton National Bank PLC. Since joining HNB in 2010, she has held C-level positions like Chief HR Officer and Chief Transformation Officer. Ms. Kure serves on various boards and has earned numerous awards, including the HR Leadership Award for Global HR Excellence and Gold category at the Women for Governance Professional and Career Women Awards. Her leadership has garnered awards in HR and sustainability for HNB, and in 2017, she chaired the National Task Force for increasing female labor force participation in Sri Lanka. Welcome, Ms. Kure. Unfortunately, Mr. Samira Jayawardena, who was originally scheduled for this panel, will not be able to join us in discussion today. Joining us instead and representing the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka, we are joined by Ms. Chadika Yahampat, Senior Manager and Project Director of ICTA Sri Lanka. A graduate of the University of Colombo, she is also a Fellow of the United Nations Women in Cyber and a co-author of the Cluster Readiness Index, or CRI. Welcome, Ms. Yahampat. Thirdly, I would like to invite Ms. Amira Ghafoor. Ms. Ghafoor is a tech entrepreneur and an attorney-to-be with a background in marketing. She has over 8 years of collective experience in sales, business development, and operations. Ms. Ghafoor began her career as a marketing specialist and evolved into a tech entrepreneur serving clients across multiple industries, particularly in the agro, insurance, and retail industry. Welcome, Ms. Ghafoor. Fourthly, I would like to invite Ms. Anishka De Silva. Ms. De Silva is the Head of Corporate Affairs, Public Policy and ESG at the Daraz Group. She is a dedicated public policy and communications professional with a strong passion for utilizing technology to address key challenges in South Asia. She provides guidance to business and governments on digital economy matters, implementing initiatives and partnerships to enhance policies and public perceptions as well. With extensive experience across public and private sectors in Sri Lanka, India, Europe, and North America, her research on policy matters is featured in global publications. Welcome, Ms. De Silva. And lastly, to introduce our moderator for this panel discussion, Dr. Roshan Pereira. Dr. Roshan is a senior fellow at the Advocata Institute and former deputy director of the Economic Research Department and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Roshan is a former director of the Ministry of Public Enterprises, former consultant for the World Bank, UNDP, and IPS, and former executive at NDB. I now hand over the mic to Dr. Roshan.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody, once again. I think we've heard a really inspiring message, but we've also seen the other side of it through this presentation on the readiness of Sri Lanka in terms of the digital economy. But I think the evidence is out there that digital technologies can create opportunities and growth. And I think in the previous panel, one thing that came out is the macroeconomy. The economy is not in good shape, but we need to address that. We need to be able to create, I think, decent jobs. And I think this is one space in which we can do that, and there's an opportunity to do that. So without taking any more time, I'll move on to this very eminent panel who are in different areas or different sectors of this whole digital space. But I'll start with you, Chadika, because you're, I think, representing the government as well, and also, the agency that is the forefront agency in this space. I think one of the things that came out from this presentation was that making, devices and the internet available and affordable will be key to making this whole digital space or digital technologies sort of widespread in the economy. How can the government really, as a key stakeholder, work towards addressing this digital divide that we now see?
Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for that question. I represent the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka. We are the government-mandated organization for the digitalization of the country. And our vision is to see a digitally inclusive country. Digitally inclusive means every citizen in this country should be able to get the benefit of technology. So women plays a huge role in our national agenda. 52% of Sri Lankan population are represented by females. Out of that, 25% of our households are headed by females. So considering the importance of their participation in the digital economy and the national economy, ICTA introduced a program called Suhurliya, specifically targeting females to bring the benefits of the technology to all segments of females in the country. So we work very closely with global partners like UNAPC, to bring down Women in Front initiative to Sri Lanka. We are the first country in the South Asia to implement the Women in Front initiative. Women in Front initiative in Sri Lanka. So we all know that the technology, the benefits of technology can be given to all segments in these females. We should have devices available, internet access, and internet should be affordable to everyone. So presently we are working with a lot of stakeholders, especially the Ministry of Women Affairs, Ministry of Public Administration, Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, TRC, to enable the accessibility, affordability, and devices to all segments of females under the Suhurule initiative. We have a lot of success stories with Suhurule. I think during the panel discussion, I should be able to share with that. The answer is yes. We are very closely working with all stakeholders in the IT industry as well as women development initiatives to make the technology, bring technology, benefit of the technology for all segments of females in Sri Lanka.
Thank you for that. So I think now I'll move to, we've heard about the government's role, or what the government is trying to do to bridge this digital divide. I'll move to you, Shiranti, and ask you, what can the corporate sector, because I think we always expect the government to do everything, but I think in this space, particularly looking at the experience in other parts of the world, I think the corporates have and the telcos particularly, have a huge role to play. So what do you think should be done, and how can they, what role can they play to make these digital divides and internet more accessible to women across countries and across income groups?
Thank you, Roshan, for that question, and thank you, Advocata, for inviting me, particularly for the question because I'm very passionate about this bridging the digital divide in gender. So actually, the gender digital divide is very real. Quite apart from the Sri Lankan study, globally also this stands true. A report published by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2020, on the request of the Australian government, also showcased G20 countries which fully committed initially in 2012 to women's full economic participation, 25 by 25, how it had got completely impeded by the COVID pandemic that has followed, and slow traction is being made. There is a digital transformation happening across the world, specifically in South Asia, similar to what even these global reports highlight, what Thatsarani and Chantal shared with us, the backwardness. Now, what can we do? Let me get straight down to the question. Bridging this digital divide, we can have some national level digital strategies. I saw how you had requested about giving different shaded preferential rates based on business classification. But before we get to that, extend networks and digital access through satellites to rural areas. That's for everyone. Men, women, and non-binary, everyone, all individuals, all citizens. And then introduce area-based tariffs. You can go by key economic indicators, especially the poverty index, right? And area-based tariffs. Here, whether we are here in Colombo or in Agunakola Palace or Karinagar or Mutur, everyone pays the same tariff. And when you looked at some of the statistics shown on the Sri Lanka map, coverage and the signal strengths were not of equal standard. So why is everyone paying the same tariff? Mm-hmm. So this is something we can look at as a corporate, as the telcos specifically. Then positively favor the districts before the poverty line in rates and pricing for pre- and post-paid mobile and internet connectivity. Specifically prepaid. The poorest of the poor or the low income earners go for these prepaid cards. And you must imagine the frustration of these people when that card limit is over. I mean, not so long ago, there were songs and memes out of this Suji incident. Suji oka karanna bari nan deepang lamekuta. Some Middle East migrant worker, a female, she's trying to transfer some money and remit it to Sri Lanka, and she's trying to tell that remittance PIN number on the phone. It is very clear she has stepped out of that domestic household in her free lunch hour or weekly, free time. And the sheer frustration of these people, and that digital divide by gender is very real. And these are really heart-rending moments. And later we go on, to internalize these and, make a story out of it. And life goes on, but we can do so much. Then promote access to
and affordability to use connected digital devices, like I think that was brought up in the research as well, specifically for low-income persons, and engage with the financial service providers, banks, finance companies, insurance companies. I see my colleague from our group from the insurance company, for preferential bundled solutions to promote access to even in the secondary market. And then boost availability and promotion of e-banking, mobile money, especially for women and disadvantaged categories. And lastly, increase online safety. There is so, I don't want to mention names being a banker. There are so many well-known cricket teams that have been, having prefixes of such companies, crypto companies, and so many that are now so many online scams. I know a particular story of this other four-letter agency. One was, apparently, I mean, it's not anything otherwise 4 letters, but apparently there are 56,000 subscribers in this cryptocurrency, and nearly 20,000 are in the Sri Lankan forces. And a lot of national young athletes have been in. I know this because I work very closely with sports ministry personnel, and one of those instructors specifically told me, Miss, one of our girls, because the money was good, she had mortgaged the house, like ugas tibba, and she put 7 or 8 lakhs into this, and today her house is no more hers. So these online financial scams, prevention, telcos can do a lot, and I'll tell you what they can do. They have bulk SMS service. You can just keep sending messages. For that, people don't even need to have a smartphone. Even like housemaids and very low-income persons have a normal analog phone. And then scams of a reputational nature. Discrimination, harassment, bullying, social stigma, trauma, and even suicide among women, and even young persons, right? So there's so much that we can do. Leading telcos and private sector, scam warnings and messages, and prevent safeguards. Use sponsored rather than just their advertisements. Radio, print media, TV. Not just for your corporate and products and services, but a message to the general public. Giving them support and show us solidarity. The other thing is road shows across provinces and districts. Big corporates can join hands. You don't have to do your own thing. What I see today is in the name of sustainability and CSR, big corporates are in their own little turf doing something. From a banking point of view, we've launched a sustainable bank, a financial initiative. We've collaborated with a lot of banks. I always advocate that we need to get together, join forces, collaborate, and work for the common good than just do our little thing in our own corner. The other thing, the final point, Roshan, is data. Telcos and financial services providers can provide more and more evidence-based gender-related actions by collecting, managing, and using gender disaggregated data. One of our former chairpersons was Dr. Rani Jayamaha. She said, she and I have, even after she's retired, we still have this conversation. She said, Ayo Shiranti, when I was in Central Bank, I presented a paper on gender-based budgeting, gender disaggregated data, so many long years ago. True, the banks are now with data analytics and BI visualization tools, data scientists doing their own thing, but at a national level. These are some of the things that we can do to bridge the digital divide and involve women. And these are a lot of the things without waiting for anyone, especially the government, the corporates can do.
Thank you, Shiranti. That was a lot of the problems. I think you highlighted a lot of the problems, but you also gave us some of the solutions. And I'm going to just move to Anishka, actually, because you work in the e-commerce space. I mean, you're one of the, you're part of a company which is one of the largest platforms operating in Sri Lanka. I mean, having a digital device is, I think, or even having access to the internet, I think is necessary, but is not a sufficient condition, right, to being part of the digital economy and particularly engaging in e-commerce. What are the other factors? I think Shiranti brought up some of the factors as well. In your experience, what are the factors that are necessary for women to really engage in this space?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. And I want to start by highlighting 5 factors. And the first is definitely education and awareness. In the island-wide survey that Daraz and Slascom did, the #1 reason for people not using, say, e-commerce was that they just don't know how to. They don't know how to shop online. They don't know how to search or browse for goods. They just don't know how to access the digital economy. So the number one, say, besides giving internet, digital infrastructure and devices, the number one sort of priority area would be digital literacy and education, but also not narrowly defined, but more in-depth defined. Countries like Malaysia are doing a lot of work on that in terms of defining digital literacy in a much more in-depth way and collecting data around that, and also disaggregated data. The second area is definitely digital payments. For the digital economy to grow, digital payments needs to grow and be adopted. In Sri Lanka, there's a big aversion to digital payments, and I think there's a part on that we'll cover later on, and we can go into more details there. But definitely driving digital payments, corporates and government both have a role to play in that, in terms of helping pushing that forward. And then the third area is definitely trust and security. People need to trust the activities of the digital economy. That it's going to work, that this is good for their own growth, for their business growth, etc. So there is trust and security stemming from that area, but also in terms of data protection, cybersecurity. But from what we've seen in Sri Lanka is, say, not at the point where people are thinking about, say, data protection and cybersecurity, at least a majority. But we are eventually going to get there, so we might as well prepare. And then the fourth is definitely product assortment and supply. Part of, say, the issue for, like, say, slow adoption rates is also Sri Lanka does have a supply issue that we see as well, where we need to start manufacturing and creating more businesses locally. Much of the, say, small and medium businesses in Sri Lanka depend on imports. That has to change. We need to start producing locally. We need more innovation, and not just for exports, but even for our own domestic consumption. And there are many, many gaps in the market, and if there was one sort of big highlight from today is the care economy is open, for businesses to set up, for businesses to grow that part of the economy, and it can very well seep into the digital economy as well. And then the fifth is definitely cross-border trade. In terms of digital trade, e-commerce, there's a lot that needs to happen there. To get Sri Lankan brands out, e-commerce can be a huge channel for that, social media included. So those are sort of the five areas that I wanted to highlight. Just particularly when you think about women, just to give you some anecdotal, say, examples, so that was sort of the big picture that I just gave before, but if you look at, say at the sort of micro level, and say from a Daraz perspective, one of the sort of areas that we've seen that sort of women face when they're already, say, engaging in e-commerce, and a barrier is sometimes control over their own business. So they might be the producer or the founder of the company, but then you have others who are really making decisions for them. We've also seen that sometimes women may not have, say, the negotiation, I don't want to say skills, but more so the thought of, okay, I'm going to negotiate with suppliers on this. So they sort of hold back, which then make them, say, uncompetitive in the digital space. And of course, there's also the double burden, right? Because as much as e-commerce provides flexibility, you can work from home, you can work for your own hours, you also have the burden of care as well. So there is that sort of, as much as it is an enabler of female labor force participation, we also have to sort of keep in mind that there might be this double burden.
So that's a great, thank you, and that's a great way to, I think, go to my next question, which is to Amira. We already heard a very successful story on a successful woman entrepreneur in the tech space. I think you have also broken through into that tech space. But I'm sure in getting there, you would have also faced challenges, like Anishka mentioned several challenges. What were the challenges you faced, and how did you actually overcome them?
Great question, Dr. Roshan. Thanks, Advocata, for having me. I think from the introduction, you might be knowing that I never really studied coding or anything of that sort. So that was actually my first barrier. I know she's over here, one of the most celebrated tech entrepreneurs in the field. But unlike Lakmini, I never studied tech. That was because I'll come back to why I didn't study tech was because my parents always wanted me to be a lawyer, right? So I had to sort of balance it out between my passion and certain expectations at home, because I'm the third in the family, so one's a doctor, one's something else, and the third has to be a lawyer, right? So for me, learning tech and actually becoming a tech entrepreneur was way much of a hill climb than an ordinary tech entrepreneur who has actually studied the field, because tech is very technical, right? You really need to know your subject, and to know that you need to study it. So from my perspective, of course, because I did not know technology, I didn't study it in a formal way, I was a self-researcher. I researched a lot. That was pretty much my first barrier in getting into the tech industry. Now, say we get into the tech industry, the second barrier that you have is no one, especially as a startup, no one really trusts you at the get-go. I'm sure Lakmini also can share this. As a woman, when you come up with anything, the first circle that you need to break through and give that confidence to is your closest circle. And that could be your friends, that could be your family. But after you have established a certain sense of confidence and credibility in the market, it pretty much is a snowball effect after that. So I spent, it's actually on my 6th day, I started the company when I was just 22. I had about 2.5 years of corporate experience. You probably know what my age is now if you know your math really well. And when I did, of course, when I did come to that stage, I realized is, first thing, when in a male-dominant industry like tech or STEM, for that matter, science, technology, engineering, of math, it's a male-dominant industry. Now, I'm not approaching this in a sort of an apprehensive way, but I'm speaking facts here. If you go to a meeting, I mean, if you'd see the slide on Lakmini that Lakmini shared, all the CEOs she has convinced are actually males, right? So if you walk into a conference room, you have to speak to males. And the first thing is there are, of course, in Colombo, in more open areas such as Colombo, we have very covert biases towards women. So we don't really say, Ganu kenek, or she's a woman, so we shouldn't trust her. But the kind of biases or the kind of discrimination that happens there is very covert. You don't see it. But of course, that acts as a glass ceiling for anyone getting in. So first is, of course, the fact that I did not study, but then over time I learned it. Second thing is the fact that I'm a female. And adding to the fact that I'm also from a minority community also adds a little bit of, a little bit more salt into that. And then the third thing is, like I said, is technology is a field, and I find this to be the truth from the data, is that when I put out vacancies, Roshan, for software engineers of that sort, from, say, if I receive 10 CVs, out of the 10, it would be 8 males who have actually sent me CVs. Now, there is actually a reason behind this, is because they did a study on this. A lot of females will not apply for something unless they feel that they are 150% qualified for the role, right? So that is nothing to do with the men, or that's nothing to do with the culture. It's something that is within you that is not allowing you to go forward. That's there. So why, even if, and their counterparts, the male counterparts, of course, if they even satisfy 10% of the requirements, they'll be like, yes, you know what, I'm going to apply for this, I'm going to get it. So that confidence alone is what gets them forward. And that is something that we cannot blame our society for. I think it all comes down to the individual and how they're able to tackle with it. But mainly, these are, because I've gone through that, I've gone through the male, these are the most some of the biggest areas that I faced in terms of my trajectory of entrepreneurship.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that really gave us an insight into the issues women face. So I'm going to just let's look at what are the solutions. So I'll ask Chandika again. I mean, I think ICTA has done some work in trying to bridge this digital divide, particularly on digital literacy. What are some of the things that ICTA has done? But I'm going to add another question because part to it, from what Anishka said, how can you build this trust basically in this system, because of this whole thing of cybersecurity and data protection, etc. How do you build that trust that people can, use the digital space?
I think, like I explained earlier, the National Strategy for Women Development that we did during last 5 years, we have done a lot of activities to bring the digital literacy of females up to 54% by now, although there are some debates on the definition of the digital literacy. We have reached to 54%. That is still not par with the global average. Thanks to a lot of partners, not only ICTA, not only the government, there are a lot of NGOs, industry associations working heavily on bringing females up in the digital literacy and digital adoption. With that, we in our second phase of our national strategy, we work very closely with all stakeholders. The next strategy for women empowerment is going to be a multi-stakeholder approach. We are following multi-stakeholder approach, bringing all stakeholders together to set KPIs and set targets and get their support, collaborations to implement the strategy across the country. That is the first step that we took to build the trust. And let's say if we take the other statistics, out of 52% of females in Sri Lanka, only 34% of females are economically active. 73% are not economically active. As ICTA, the responsible organization for digitalization, we are looking at how we can make them economically inactive females to economically active, introducing technology. So there are several initiatives that ICTA run, like we are introducing freelancer programs to females to bring them to the economically active status. And also there are digital entrepreneurship development, introducing digital entrepreneurship to females so that they can use technology effectively and contribute to the national economy. So there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of partner organizations, a lot of government entities and industry associations have already partnered with us in this journey. So that is how we are going to take this forward in future.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard the voice of the government, but I'll go to you, Shiranti, and ask you, I think Chandika mentioned that there are multi-stakeholder approach. You need to have, various stakeholders, all the stakeholders need to be involved. What are the initiatives that the other, NGOs, telcos, the private sector has undertaken? But what more needs to be done? Because we're still lagging behind, as she said rightly, we are still lagging behind. What needs to be done?
So actually, like you said, Roshan, ICTA, Nanasara, Vidata, Suhuruli, a lot of programs are underway and very commendable efforts. It's not easy. Having said that, yes, professional bodies, chambers, corporates, NGOs, even individuals can do so much more. Let's say, for example, I'll use a practical example. You will get an e-flyer of an MBA, at least 2-3 MBAs every month. So if you have an email account, your inbox gets flooded with this MBA from this university and differently priced, different structures, different tenors, different teaching methods and the modalities. Now, is there any independent online content evaluation and compare contrast? There's a lot of business opportunity and a real need in the market. So digital literacy is not just the ability to use the digital instruments, but also filter the data and make informed decisions and which are relevant to the users, right, of the information that keeps flowing. Because I see a lot of young people enrolling into courses which are probably not of the greatest standards and maybe not meeting their needs as well. So there's so much of information that is just pushed to you, access to learn about opportunities in education, and then various online courses. If you have a Facebook account, so many online courses come in, and then these are priced at dollars, and people go and actually pay for these. Digital and e-commerce, again, some service providers don't even have a problem resolution active channel. There are two very key operating platforms, and I'll name them, Uber and PickMe, for rides, right? I'll ask you to go and check for yourselves the customer complaint resolution mechanisms of one which is a global and one which is a very local app. One of them I have very highly rated every time. So these are real issues. Now you have to be also digitally literate when something goes wrong when you use an app to reach that conflict resolution medium or channel that's available. But the best education. So there's so much more. It's not only do we need to educate, but how to use it. Is it relevant to me? Then there's so much of massive open online education MOOCs, right? Now again, same story. Increased participation in STEM-related secondary, tertiary, vocational. It's very nice to see the heightened awareness of the lack of women in STEM education or in STEM businesses. But we can use this literacy, to make them more literate about this. Again, leadership skills, visual and experiential learning methods, connecting, also project management, cultural awareness. If you are digitally literate, you can work from anywhere and get connected with a global community. And how are we educating these people? Even global support groups, right? So, let's take a platform like Facebook. There are groups. Global, there are crowdsourcing groups, traveling, health issues, cooking, anything you like, right? So these also, it's a form of literacy, but who's educating them? We can do a lot. And especially from Women's Chamber, we are looking at financial inclusion and digital inclusion for women entrepreneurs. We are taking steps to take that agenda forward. In terms of, again, economic empowerment of women, digital literacy also becomes a more cost-effective way for women to work from anywhere, and that sets off some of the wage disparities between genders. The other thing is something very simple, like health and wellness, beauty and personal care. You can almost if you're literate, you can have access to a wide world of knowledge, which would otherwise you would be disenfranchised simply because you don't have money, right? To go and do your basic things, something to make a person happy and feel a little bit more content. So, and also other things like child minding, child rearing. So there's a world of knowledge out there. It's not just literacy of how to use that, but also to filter and sort what is relevant to you. Otherwise, what I also see is that Sri Lankans actually are amazingly active on TikTok, right? Especially a lot of rural youth population and a lot of young women. Sometimes I wonder whether some of it is very socially, healthy as well, and can be also toxic digital culture and a lot of time wasters. So there's a lot of areas in this digital literacy that we have to weed prune, and a lot of us, so all these NGOs, even individuals, as I came and sat with Gaini, I just said, look, you and I have some work to do. That's not a very personal issue, because we don't have to wait for anybody. If we like to do something, we can get down there and do it. because there's so many needs out there. So government like ICTA, but especially companies, and because companies are also doing a lot of push product services, and but then help people make informed choices. I think that's very much needed.
I think that's absolutely a good point. That we need to. There's so much of digital literacy is not this narrow definition of helping people to know how to use their mobile devices, but it's much more than, much broader. So Amira, just turning to you, you talked about when you were young that you were not necessarily encouraged, and you said something like this whole thing of STEM education and why you didn't go into it. How can we, because I think that's one of the things, right, in getting women into this is having more women actually engaging in STEM education, but also getting into these careers in technology and digital fields. How can that be promoted? How can we sort of encourage women?
That's such a valid question in today's day and age. I think the government is doing slightly a bit better than it was. I think they have introduced web development in that area, I think very recently or something of that sort. But a lot of you also in the audience, let's look at some of the A-level subjects that you all have done right now. For me, in terms of what I did accounting, economics, and English literature. Now, comparing that to what I am doing right now, it's completely different. Now, I could have actually spent those 2 years learning something of technology, either technology or even law, of which I actually have studied. So I don't know if this is a global plan of countries to keep their citizens less, if they're trying to just get them framed to a certain way. But the school system does not, it doesn't cultivate creative thinking whatsoever. Entrepreneurship is not taught in schools. Personal finance is not taught in schools. Soft skills are not taught in schools. These are subjects that we learn along the way through mistakes mostly, and probably through traits that we pick up from our families. Now, in terms of STEM education and some of the statistics that I don't want to throw in a lot of statistics, but I just want to bring in some context to this, right? So in terms of females entering STEM education, we have about 49%, Dr. Roshan, which is from STEM graduates, from those certain degrees in those disciplines, we have 49% of females getting into STEM subjects. Now that's quite high, because comparatively in the UK and Canada, the rate is within less than 30s, somewhere below 40, definitely below 40s, but somewhere between 20s and the 30s. But now when it comes to that point, and when you come to translating that into a STEM workforce, that dwindles down to just about 15% of women in STEM workforce. So that's really, really low. And we shouldn't only consider getting them employed in STEM-related workforce. I, of course, feel as an entrepreneur, what you could do is you could actually start building entrepreneurial skill sets in school itself, in those areas. It doesn't necessarily have to be that everyone who comes out of school has to go get employed at a multinational organization. It could be that they incubate their idea, and some of the challenges that we identified here, we can incubate it in school and they actually can start their entrepreneurial journey. Because how I see it is, we just only have about 1% of entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. So from a population of 22 million, 1 to 1.5% is absolutely a small number. And also from that 1.5%, you only have 10% of female entrepreneurs. So that's really disappointing. And I don't think we should play the blame game here. I mean, institutions, especially private schools, international schools who have their own constitution, can introduce this easily. I don't know how the government plans on implementing all of that, but we need to create, because there are two ways that you can increase your GDP. The first way is you can increase it by increasing the, the price of goods, inflation, which we've been doing very successfully. And the second way is, of course, is to create new output, right? To create new value into the GDP. And how we do that is we need people who can create that value. And a lot of that value comes through entrepreneurs. I'm not saying all of it, but a significant amount of that value is created by entrepreneurs when they start employing people. And that sort of has a trickle-down effect on their families and the communities around. So those are some of the most important areas, Roshan. What I feel is STEM should be brought into the education system, because we don't have time to explore those areas. Because for my, in terms of myself, I never knew anything about actually technology, to be honest, when I was in school. I only knew the main disciplines, which was medicine, which was probably law, and that's the reason why I've done law, and then just a few other areas as well. But I didn't know what STEM was, and that's really bad, because being unaware of the opportunities, there's a massive opportunity cost to that. So we have to start in school, even if we start slow and small. I think within the trajectory of the next 10 years, the next 2 decades, we'll have more people who will add more value to the economy.
I think that was, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I'm going to open the floor to the audience, and if there are any questions, please, I think there's a mic that will come to you. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that were raised.
I think maybe sometimes you don't have to kind of introduce these things into curriculums and all, because it takes a lot of time, right? Because there is a lot of loopholes that you need to go through and, you know, kind of get approvals and things like that. But in my experience during our school days, even our curriculums didn't have much of these STEM things, but we had a lot of societies. We had astronomy society, we had, like, you know, computer society. Now I'm actually working for a, you know, IT industry. Actually, my first inspiration came from the computer society. We had only one computer. That is also 386. I don't know whether you can, some of the people here can, you know, kind of resemble. So maybe we can promote those kind of, you know, initiatives in the already existing infrastructure, and maybe support them as well. And that way, actually, we can popularize this STEM, education or awareness. So I thought, just came into my mind probably to share that thought.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, actually. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
While all this talk was going on, my mind was going down to the grassroots level. And how accessible, about the accessibility and affordability of these. I can just tell you one story. In schools, some teachers have now started giving work on smartphones to get done. And this boy, very intelligent boy, has come and told his mother that he wants a smartphone. This mother, the father is not there. She's bringing up 3 kids with what she earns from domestic work. And she finds it very difficult to give them three meals a day. She's asking, how can I find 20,000 rupees to buy a smartphone? This is the story of most of the rural people. So how do we, I mean, to be just and fair, how do we get this knowledge right down to the grassroots level without these children being able to afford the devices they must have?
Would someone like to take that on? Maybe ICTA, because you probably faced it during COVID, right? When children were in school and didn't have school, sorry.
Yes, I think when we introduce digital education to school, one of the biggest challenges that we also faced is the access to devices. Sometimes back there were some projects to introduce devices to schools, but it was not happen. So with the COVID, this problem actually came up, and yes, together with the Ministry of Education, ICTA has also initiated a program called Donate a Device project. We invited all the people to register with our Donate to Device project and donate some of the devices to needy schools and needy children. That project is going on from Ministry of Education and ICTA. That is not to address the whole problems in the country, but at least to address some of the problems of the students.
So I'm just going to ask another follow-up question. So there's an issue with, I think, the secondary market to smartphones, right? Because I think once you register a phone, you can't necessarily sell it. Now, is there interagency cooperation? Because this obviously requires cooperation between different government agencies, regulatory agencies. Is that happening? Because I think that again can promote the secondary market for smartphones, or even actually the, as you said, people donating smartphones for use.
At the moment, that particular task is being handled by Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. Okay. ICTA is not mandated actually to look into that matter, but ICTA together with Ministry of Education, we try our level best to address the devices of the problem.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Any other questions? Okay, one.
Good evening. I am Dr. Zulfik. In fact, our ambassadors who go as ambassadors to other countries, I recently saw how an ambassador has brought the respect, disgrace the country's name by getting his private secretary molested. Because I'm bringing this up because of empowering about women, so that this will not happen again. So how do you overcome this problem? How do you overcome, because this Sri Lankan ambassador had already tarnished the name of our country. And where he has molested, that has come in the newspaper.
Yeah.
So
can we take this question offline?
I just wanted to know how do we overcome this?
Yeah. So can we take this question offline, because not necessarily related to this subject. Okay. I'd like to stick to this subject because we've got very limited time, and I'm sure there are questions in the audience, Yeah,
because of our country's name.
Yes, we will take this question offline.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for the interesting conversation. I'm from Learn Asia, so the survey that was spoken about was done by us. So just a kind of a little update on the data, there's a more recent survey that we've done, and it shows that in fact in Sri Lanka, after COVID, the gender gaps in access have actually come down quite a bit. So I think internet access is not really the big issue anymore. It's really about meaningful access. Do they have the skills and so on, as the conversation has shown. But also, I'd just like to add a couple of other points. One point was on the need for data. I agree completely. We do need more data, but I think we also have to be cautious in sort of where that data comes from. Obviously, the ideal is nationally representative surveys, census, etc., HIES, but those are often outdated and take time. But other new data sources like data from banks, data from mobile CDRs, and so on, we also have to be cautious about who is visible and who is not visible in that data and the biases that come along with that, especially women. To do with women, there's often certain kinds of women, certain socioeconomic groups, and so on that are less visible in data sources. So yes, there's a great need for data, but we also do have to, there's a nuanced kind of view to that also. And then on sort of the conversation on remote and flexible sort of work or digital entrepreneurship and sort of the online freelancing that was also mentioned, while these are all great in that they do provide opportunities for women to work flexibly and remotely and participate in the economy and so on. But I think there's also some caution there that we should take in that should not be the end goal. Because really the question is, why are women going towards these types of work? It's because of the constraints they face in terms of the care burden, mobility constraints, and so on and so forth. By women going into these types of work, we are reinforcing these sort of norms about the care burden. They still have to take care of the kids and do the housework and work at home. So it becomes a triple burden, in fact. Yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. One more question? Okay, we might have to wrap up. We'll take it offline outside, yes.
Hi, I'm Zainab, and from Capsasina Azalem Foundation. And just a quick question out of curiosity, that as we see tech and the digital economy increasing widely, and we do see a lot of mobilization. So I was just wondering, as we see in the rural areas that the youth and the children, they're deprived, not basically deprived, but the accessibility to education with regards to digital economy is very less. So I just wanted to know, with regards to the tech companies and multi-tech tech entrepreneurs, has there been any recommendations or career skill guidance being implemented in order to influence the children in the rural areas so that will enhance and encapsulate education such as the soft skills and few other, which will bring about a goal in investing the youth for the future decades?
Thank you. So I'm going to get Lakshmini to actually answer that question, and I think you also had a comment, but I think maybe you can answer that question too, on how do we actually make this available to the rural, this whole accessibility of technology to the rural areas.
So actually, I'll combine it with the question I was going to ask as well. Okay, so I'll actually make my comment as well and kind of combine it, because as it is, it's quite a difficult problem we have, because we're a poor country, and ability to get across all this, because devices, cost, all that is there, and I'm sure Ikta knows. So I just want to mention, like, whole of today in the morning, whole bunch of us, including Ikta, there's a massive artificial intelligence drive driven by the presidential secretary, the government, to leapfrog the country, in a sense, from technology. So yes, technology, but artificial intelligence itself. And this is pretty serious. All of us are putting our minds to it. So I kind of believe with that, there's funding. There's lots of, for artificial intelligence, there's funding, and therefore for technology. So actually my question was really for Amira saying this and a take on it, because, I don't have an answer for today, but 2024 onwards, the budget is getting lots of it. And we're hoping, at least, we're putting all the budget proposals. So, and there's a lot of intervention from overseas parties, from UNDP to World Bank to multiple organizations coming and trying to help us as a country on artificial intelligence, and therefore technology, devices, etc. So this is from little children to middle school to university, lots of certifications coming free to us, given out to all of us, like bombarded really, so that we take it up. So anyway entrepreneur and very optimistic, so hopefully we can all take it. So the question really was to Amira, like being an entrepreneur, being a woman in that committee, there was Dushni and a lot of others, we wanted to make that a leapfrogging for women, because this is a new technology, right? And if Sri Lanka could like have a larger percentage than other regional countries of AI engineer women, that whole thing sounded really interesting. So just the open question really, it's coming. And we all, all of us have to take it. So any thoughts? I don't know. It's not a specific question, but.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that, Lakmini, you've been able to build a company like that sort of sets the standard for a lot of other women also to come into the field. And the fact that AI has been a buzzword for the last few years. And also with COVID coming in, we introduced remote working, that was number one. And then of course with AI and ChatGPT coming in, there's a massive drive for AI as services. So we as entrepreneurs and Sluscom and Shehani in the audiences, we're always very optimistic. We're trying to, Sluscom is doing so much good work. I was really I was in awe when I actually saw the Skills Connect platform that they have and all of that. So I know what the private companies are doing, and that's exactly why I'm not trying to complain about the system, because I know what a lot of other stakeholders are also doing. So I'm completely positive about that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think we have to end this conversation because time is running out. But it's been a really interesting learning experience for me, and I'm sure for all of you in the audience as well. So I really want to thank all the panelists for this very engaging discussion, and also for the audience for your questions and your engagement in this conversation. So I think the takeaways, I think, from this is, yes, digital infrastructure is really important. We have to move ahead on that. We need to, as a country, I think there's a long way we have to go. But it is not only the role of the government. I think that all the stakeholders have to partner, come in partnership to really move this forward. So I hope that would be the message from this, and that we all will be, push this whole digital technology or the digital economy forward, because as we started out at the beginning, the macroeconomy is very in a very precarious situation. We have job losses, and the thing is that we really need to create good jobs, and I think this is one area in which that is a possibility, and particularly in the realm of women, I think there is a great opportunity for creating jobs, decent jobs in this space. So thank you again, and I'll hand it over to Sumia to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists as well as our moderators for today. So we've now come to the end of the event. And just before we go, we'd like to extend our thanks to the Netherlands Embassy for supporting this event, as well as to the Advocata Institute for facilitating this event. I'd also like to say thank you to the wonderful team who has worked tirelessly over the past few days to make this event a success. And most importantly, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today and sitting here and giving us your attention as well as your engagement. All the presentations from today's event can be accessed online via Advocata's website, that's advocata.org. You can also support the Women's Policy Action Network by following all of their social media pages. Please do share your feedback of today's event with us. As you exit the event hall, you will also notice team members with video cameras who will be recording your feedback. Please share your thoughts in any language you are comfortable with, and we also have a feedback survey for you all to access and give your feedback through that. We also have a photo booth set up outside, so I hope you will use it and make use of it. And refreshments are also available. Our speakers will also be around, so if you have any further questions that we could not answer here, you can always speak to them later on. So I'd just like to say once more, thank you everyone for your attendance today, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you.